So what's going on, man? How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Finally, good to meet in person. Obviously, we've seen each other's stuff. We get tagged in each other's stuff, but
Yeah, every
like
fucking
nine,
every day.
dude, like 99% of the time I go to your video, I'm like, everything here is accurate. I don't know why I'm being tagged, but
I don't think a lot of people realize that, they'll tag you or anybody else. And I think people just hear what you say or what I say or what somebody else says, and we might say it a slightly different way and they take it out of context or they don't fully understand what we're really talking about. So they hear me
yeah,
say one thing and then they think you're gonna go against it when I already know, you know, I know what I'm saying is true. I know you're gonna fucking agree with it
right.
if you know what you're talking about. So a lot of people don't
No,
realize that.
I find that the main issue is this. People will extrapolate what you're saying. So
Mm-hmm.
what they do is they hear one thing and then they assume it's like, oh, okay, then that means that you must also think this and must also, and they take and they make this long train of thought, and then they assume that you're going to disagree with the thing that the other person said when it could not even be even related.
Yeah,
It could be completely separate conversations.
yeah. It's very common on that app, but I don't really know much about you. Tell me about yourself. How old are you?
I try to be a mystery. I'm 28.
You're
So
28. Okay.
yeah, I'm an old guy.
Do you think I
Most
look
people,
older than you?
oh, I think you look at least as old as me, if not older.
That's crazy because I feel like you look older than me.
No, no. When somebody told me because I'd seen your stuff and everything. Somebody told me they're like, yeah, he's 23. I was like, there's no way.
Yeah, I think
There's no
it
way
has
this
to
guy.
it has to be the beard.
I don't know. Even when you shaved though for your competition, like you still had like an older look, I think. And I mean, let's be real. Also, if you have a good physique, it's gonna age you by like 5 to 10 years automatically.
If you just have, I feel like normal test levels, you look older than the majority of people. But you were
Fair
saying,
enough.
you're 28. How did you get into all of this?
Okay, so I actually kind of have a weird background. So I was an athlete my whole life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Pretty high level soccer player. Was supposed to be going to play professionally, and then I got an injury. And this was back when I was in high school. I wasn't even planning on going to college, and then I got an injury. I was kind of like stuck in basically bed rest for 2 years, not actually, but not able to play. And then I was like, you know what? I got to go to college. So I went to college, did what I could as far as soccer, and I still did okay in college, but it wasn't like I was ever the player that I used to be.
Yeah.
And then after that, I was like, I went through for geology. Most people don't realize that. But in geology, you do like tons of scientific dissection. It's just all the time because of the fact that it's like it's a very it's a field where you can't really see everything that's happening. You have people debating on stuff all the time and like going through literature, pitting things against each other. And so I got very good at that. And it was something that was really fascinating to me. So then I just started applying it to other areas when I got outside of college. So I started applying it to nutrition, training, stuff
So you
like
got
that.
your degree in geology.
Yeah. Nothing related to sports physical science. Like it got to the point though where I was starting to post stuff, I was starting to go through things. And then my college actually, one of the main guys in the kinesiology department, he's like, we need to have you come in and like do some lectures for our class. And I'm like, you realize these people technically have more formal training on this particular subject than I do. And
Yeah.
he's like, yeah, but you have like you've done a lot of background knowledge and stuff like that. Long story short, it's like I started off as a teacher. So I was teaching like physics, chemistry, biology, and I was training people in the background, but nothing too serious. And
At
then COVID
college?
hit. No, this was at high school.
Yeah, high school. Okay.
And then COVID hit. And when COVID hit, it was like I was still getting paid to be a teacher, but there wasn't a whole lot we could do. So I was like, I'm just going to throw myself into like trying to become like a more full-time coach, nutrition, stuff like that. And from there, it just kind of exploded. And from that point on, like I just never looked back. Some guy said, you need to get on TikTok. That's where it's at. TikTok's where it's at. TikTok, if you're not doing it, you're behind the eight ball. And
Okay,
then it
so,
was
so
just,
let's backtrack a little here. How did you
yeah,
get
sure.
into training?
Because of the fact that like so when I was playing in college, there was a spring season. It was my junior or senior year where I was like I was still dealing with the residual injury that I'd had before I got to college. And I told my coach, I said, you know what, going into senior year, if you want me to be at my absolute best for senior year, you need to let me just take half a year to myself to not be like playing soccer, not be aggravating this injury all the time. And
Yeah.
he's like, okay, like I can handle that. So I just started lifting because I was bored out of my mind. I
So
was like,
that was your first introduction to, well, you didn't
yeah.
train previously for soccer though? They didn't have you work
Not,
out,
not
lift weight?
like not real weight. I mean, if you saw the workouts that these people did, you'd be like, okay, what are you even doing? Like, this is
Yeah, yeah.
pointless. So like that was the first time I actually took lifting seriously. So I started getting to more of like powerlifting style lifts. And then it was like later on down the line that I was like, I mean, I'm not gonna be a power lifter, so I want to get more into the bodybuilding side of things. That's when I started transferring things over. But that was my first like legitimately throwing myself into gym work was junior year of college.
Okay. So you were already like 20.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm that's the thing. I'm like people will often ask me, they'll be like, "Oh, like how long you been working out for?" I'm like, it depends on what you mean by working out because like I was
Yeah.
doing push-ups and pull-ups and stuff for soccer, but like soccer players didn't do bench press. Soccer
Yeah.
players didn't do that. That was always the thing. It was like we're functional. We don't do that stuff.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So then how did you get into personal training from that?
just through like people started taking a look at me. They're like, "You look like you know what you're doing." So they started talking. So I was like, "I guess I could probably do some. I probably could make a little bit of money out of this," but I didn't obviously charge much or anything like that.
So you
And it
just
was like
started.
just started working with family, friends, stuff like that. And then that was when I started going into. And then it wasn't until COVID hit and everything became technological. I was like, you know what? Like I got to adapt or I'm not going to survive. I was like, I need to actually get on the technological side of things. And that was when I started doing online stuff. But before that, none of it was on. It was all just in person work.
Okay, but so when you did in person work, it was just through, word of mouth people you knew. You never worked at like a commercial gym or anything like that, like as a trainer. Okay.
Nope. Well, I just used my college gym because I could get in there for free, and they didn't really care if you were working in there on your own.
Yeah.
So I just used it.
Yeah. Yeah. I gotcha. So then COVID hit, blew up on TikTok, and just started blowing up the business from there. And how's that
Yeah,
going?
exactly.
It's going good.
It's going really well. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
it was like it's obviously you have to like snowball it and it slowly grows more and more. But this last year has been by far the best. So, and it's only growing. But
Yeah.
I mean, you're 23 and you're already top of the line. It's crazy.
Yeah. It's weird because like I don't feel like I'm 23 at all
Yeah.
in any aspect. I have a house. I live with my girlfriend. I feel like a
Right.
fucking old man, you know.
No, if
But
you get into this sphere and you start doing things properly, you're going to be well ahead of everybody else in terms of overall maturity and the way you handle things.
but
It's
yeah,
just
I've been doing this since I was 11. Well, consistently in the gym since 13. I've been working out. I mean, like you
right.
said, count working out. I grew up working out, just doing P90X and shit for fun. But
Yeah, well, I saw some of your videos where you were like, where people were like, "How can you like be talking about this? Like you're only such and such an age. You don't have enough experience." You're like, "It's not my fault that you were playing." Well, I can't remember how you were worded it,
it's
but it
not
was
my
like,
it's not my fault that while you were fucking in your mom's basement playing Black Ops 2, I was doing P90X. Like
yeah, yeah. I saw that. I was just dying. I was
because
just
people
dying reading
people can't
that.
fathom it. Like they think of, what was I doing when I was 10 years old, and they don't realize like I was
Right.
working out. Like I still had fun
Right.
and did shit, but I also just worked out. It was just what I, like to do. And I feel like some people can't process why would a 10-year-old like to work out. I don't know why, but it's just the way they
Right.
were raised. But
Well,
um
that's also, I mean, that's part of the reason why when people ask me when I started working out, I don't say junior year of college because it's like I was still going hard in various types of training, and I still did like squats and stuff like that when I was younger. So it's really hard. Like it's not like a black and white, like, oh, one day I decided to go to the gym and then I started building my muscle. It's not like that for me. But
mhm.
no, I think it's so cool when I see guys like you who had fully developed physiques by the time you were 18. I think that's just wild.
Yeah, it's fucking
I shouldn't say
it's crazy.
fully developed, but like you look like a fully developed physique by the time you're 18. It's insane.
And that's why every time I post the videos that like do the best for me on TikTok is when I just say like post a picture of me when I was 15 or 16 and everybody's like, what the fuck? They go crazy. I was on gear, I was on SARMs, whatever, whatever they want to say. But it's just
Yeah.
funny. So you competed recently, no?
Not crazy recently, but it was last September. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was the first show you've done?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have any plans to continue competing, pursuing bodybuilding in a competitive aspect?
I got bit. I
You got
got bit
bit?
hard. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, it's like I had no plan to even enter the show until so what happened was it was in May and people and I hadn't been like lean in a while. And then Echo, my main sponsor, Echo Vision, they were like, "Hey, we're gonna do a meetup. Like, we're gonna take a lot of photos, do a lot of video and stuff like that." I said, "Oh, okay. So do you want me to come in like looking good for that?" And they were like, "Yeah, that'd be cool." And so I just did like a super hard mini cut to get ready for that. And I just documented the process. And when I got there, because I had always filmed on like a really, really bad camera, nobody realized I actually had muscle. It was like you're just like a science guy. You don't actually have a physique and stuff like that. And then when they saw me in person, they said, "You don't. This is not what I was expecting. Like you actually
Yeah.
have a good physique." And then that was when I'm sure you know Knable, Stephen Knable, and Josh Nabby.
Is it Knable?
Um, yeah,
I
crazy,
thought
right?
the K was silent.
So did I. So
Bro,
did I
what?
until he told me otherwise. It's yeah, it doesn't make any sense. I think their whole family is just pronouncing it wrong, to be honest. But
I feel like they just decided
but
to, just make that rule. They're like, it's fucking Knable.
exactly, exactly. They just wanted to be different.
Yeah.
But anyways, it was like I met those guys and they were like, you could actually do some damage at a show if you tried. I'm like, I don't know, like I've never considered actually stepping on stage. They're like, no, no, you should do it. So then I was like, okay. So I just cut an extra, I think it was like 4 or 6 weeks, got ready for stage and stepped on. And I honestly did not expect to do well. I just assumed that it would be nearly impossible as a natural athlete to be able to come against guys who were taking substances and do okay.
So this
But
was a regular local NPC show.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it was the New York Grand Prix. And I stepped on and the funniest part was backstage, I was looking at all these other guys. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna get absolutely blown out of the water. But the thing is, like, my conditioning was just better. So it was like, so there were
Mm,
guys back there who had much better shape than me, like who I ended up beating on stage just because when the lights come down, it's like obviously you have to have a certain level of leanness.
yeah.
And and I looked at it and I stepped off the stage thinking I was doing poorly, not realizing what it meant when you were moved to the middle and stuff. Like I had no idea. And then other people were like, no, no, you killed it. I was like, no way. And then we got to the finals and they were like, yeah, like I got like a bunch of firsts and seconds, and I was really surprised. But there was a guy who came second or third in one of the categories against me, who I'm actually working with right now. Because I talked to him after the show. I'm like, dude, like you should have absolutely destroyed me. Like you're bigger, you're fuller, you got everything on me. The only difference was I had better conditioning. I'm like, so next time you have a show, I'm like, contact me and like we'll go through it and I'll get you conditioned to that level. So now I'm working with that guy right now
There you go.
and
That's funny.
and next show like he would, let's put it this way, if we stepped on the same stage it would be lights out for him.
Yeah, well, a lot of people, I mean, you don't realize until they do a show at a local show, at least not a nationals, at a local show,
Mhm.
a lot of people are not conditioned. So if you come in
Nope.
conditioned, the odds are very much in your favor, even if you're getting outsized. There's
Yep.
so many guys come in out of shape, especially you see it in bikini, all the divisions really. But yeah, I mean, if you came in peeled, that's gonna fucking already give you such a huge advantage at a local show alone. So
Right.
since you've done that now, are you qualified for a national show?
I think I technically am, but because of the fact that I want to take more time and put on more size, I'm not going to bother.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
it's just not worth it for me.
You want to do classic? Is that what you did?
So I've done classic and I've done men's physique. The funny part is I actually technically did a little bit better in men's physique than I did in classic, but I think my overall build and stuff like that long term will be better suited to classic. I
Hmm.
just don't have the like we've talked about before, the princess waist and the
Yeah,
and the wide broad shoulders. Like obviously it's still helpful for classic to have those things, but if you don't have it for men's physique, it's like you're just gonna get destroyed.
yeah, yeah. Well, I don't have wide, broad shoulders, but it just comes down to really how you develop your physique and obviously having the genetics in the first
Right.
place. If your genetics are just so far out there, you're kind of just fucked. But do you want to go hop over to the dark side? Have you thought about that?
That is an interesting question to say the least. I don't think I will, to be completely
Really?
honest. I know. I've had a Well, it's funny because there's been some people who, some mutuals of ours who have talked to me who've been like, like if you did, you could take it up to that next notch. I'm like, I know, but I just here I have a couple of different reasons. One, obviously, is first and foremost is health. Like, no matter what, you are risking a little bit,
Hmm.
even if you are smart about it. There's always going to be those risks.
Yeah.
And then there's the other fact that people, even though I don't think it's smart, even though I think it's kind of dumb, there are a lot of people who just do not want to listen to you if they can't relate to you, and if you're not natural, they feel like they can't relate to you.
Do you think that's why people argue with me?
I think it's a big part of the reason.
People will use that as an argument a lot of the times,
It's so it's terrible, and I think it's really dumb because it's like good information is good information,
Yeah.
and just because somebody's taking gear doesn't mean they don't have good information. Just because somebody's not taking gear doesn't mean that they're going to have great information. It's
Yeah.
and people kind of blur this line as to whether they choose to believe somebody or not based on their own biases, but then they'll use the gear as like a spearhead.
Yeah. Well, it really
And I'm
makes
like,
it makes no sense because obviously, there's people on gear that don't know fucking anything, and there's people who are natural who don't know anything, and there's people on gear who are extremely smart, people who are natural who are extremely smart. But realistically, if you take somebody who's on gear, they have most likely have had experience training naturally. So people will
right,
always use this argument of, well, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about because he's on gear. You can only train like that because you're on gear, and you say that as if this guy didn't train for 5-6 years naturally firsthand. As if we
right.
don't have both sides, experience with both sides. And obviously, like I said, there's people who still may not know shit, but I feel like in a lot of aspects, it gives that person more insight in a sense because they've gone through both sides.
Right. Well, one thing I've noticed too is as the minute you say that you've touched gear, it's like if you're not on the level of a Mr. of like a Mr. Olympia, then you don't know what you're talking about. It's like, well, you're taking gears and you're not even as big as these guys.
Well,
So
now,
how could
well,
you know?
now they even
It's,
fucking come after those guys.
it's oh, it's absolutely unreal. Oh, and the other thing is like as soon as you say that you've touched, I watch the conversations in the background because I want to see how people respond to other people when they say they're taking stuff or when they are taking stuff, and I watch to see what it's like because I'm also trying to figure out for me, is this
Mhm.
something that would ever be in my future? And I watch them just discredit every single thing you've ever done as both on gear and off of it.
Yep.
Because if you're like, oh yeah, I like started taking when I don't know, like were you 19, 20,
I was 18.
18? Yeah. Then it's like, well, here's me before you, and they're like, well, why would I believe you now? It's like
Yeah.
no, you probably were. You probably were. You were before that point anyways. And it's like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm telling you right now, I started at this time, and then I show you this picture. I'm 16. Well, you were on gear, you were on SARMs. Then why would I? What benefit would that have for me
Right.
to lie about it at that point? Why would I come on here and just lie to say I have these insane genetics? I don't even think I have insane genetics, but it just makes no sense to me why people are just so quick to assume everybody is deliberately lying to them when they're not really gaining anything from it to begin with.
I think it really comes down to, in the end, it comes down to the fact that people just want to have excuses.
Of course.
They enjoy having the out. So like when I tell people, yeah, like I've done this, and it's like, oh well, you must be on gear, or like the funny thing is, it's usually one or the other. It's either you're on gear or you have insane genetics. And I'm like, look, I lifted around other people when I was in college too. Like I was not the biggest. I was
Mm-hmm.
not progressing as fast as these other guys. You know what was the difference is I actually stuck with it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
kept going and I kept putting in the work over time. And it's like you can say like I have good genetics. Like I'm not going to say I don't think you can develop an amazing like a great physique without having good genetics. Like or like at least average
I
genetics.
think a lot of people
But
have better genetics than they actually realize. They just do not have the
that is it.
discipline. Yeah.
That right there is it. And
Everybody has an excuse.
I found that one of the biggest differences between those who are actually capable of building a good physique and those who aren't are the ones who are actually capable of pushing themselves.
Hmm.
Like some people just I've watched and I'm like they'll send me their workouts and I'll be like, okay, well you have more in you than what you put on that video. No, no,
Yeah.
I was dying. I'm like, no, I can see it. I can see your rep speed.
Yeah.
I can see the fact that when you did your last rep, you were going almost the same speed as your first rep.
Mm-hmm.
It's like no, I was dead. I'm like, no, do more. And then they'll send me a video like 3 weeks from then. And it'll be the same thing, just maybe a tiny bit hard. I'm like, you've been doing this for the last 5 years and you've been nowhere near actual failure on any of your exercises.
Yeah.
And you're blaming your genetics for not having this. You just aren't, you just can't, there's some mental block there that's keeping them from pushing to that next level. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that makes a far bigger difference than what a lot of people would deem as just having bad genetics.
Yeah. It's just how they, perceive the effort that they're putting in. They tell themselves that they're working harder than they are. They don't realize that, the way that I see it is you could always work harder. I could have the craziest fucking workout, push myself to the walls, throw up, but then, I could go train with Brett Wilkin and I'm like, holy fucking shit, I train like a pussy. Like, it's just,
Yeah.
there's everything, it puts everything into perspective, but you do that with your clients too. You do the form evaluation videos.
Yeah.
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 And I just, it, it honestly shocks me that it's just something that we keep coming back to time and time again is people do not put in the intensity that they need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then they're,
It's
and
a
they'll,
mental battle.
it really is. And because I used to think the whole idea of like the no pain, no gain, blah, blah, blah. I used to think it was all like kind of just dumb hype stuff.
No.
And then I actually got into serious training and decided to push myself to that next level. And everything. It was like I had newbie gains again.
Mm-hmm.
When I started taking my training to the point where I was like, no, like you don't know what failure is. Like actually push yourself. It was like I was experiencing newbie gains over again.
Yeah.
I don't know how else to describe it.
Yeah. Well, I've talked about this before, but when I was 15, I kind of had a mentor, was a guy like 21 around my age, and he would like pick me up, bring me to the gym with him, and he was a bodybuilder competing in open bodybuilding. None of the other divisions, men's physique just came out at that time, but he would have me train with him, and he would have me do the craziest shit I've ever done at that point in time, and it just completely opened me up to how to really train to failure and really push intensity. Like I've said before, he would have me we'd go to the gym, do squats, barbell squats, and I can't even do I've never touched 225. I'm afraid to do it. I'm sticking with like 185. He would put 225 on and be like, all right, 20 reps. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? And he would, even if I failed, like he would pick me up and force me to do 20 reps, and I would throw up after the first set. And we would do these ridiculously high volume workouts, shit I would never do now. Just obviously having more knowledge, but we would literally do like 20, 30 working sets, insane,
Yeah.
insane volume, just intensity. And although, maybe a lot of that might have been junk volume, doing that, taught me the threshold, how to really push myself and have that level of intensity. Because if you could do that, even if you're doing junk volume and you could maintain that for fucking a 3 hour workout, you're going to be able to push yourself a lot harder when you do low volume, just your perception of what doing that much volume is.
Right. Well, I think there's a huge disconnect between the people who are super serious about stuff and the people who think they're super serious about stuff. So
Oh
what
yeah.
happens is the people who think they're super serious about stuff, they come on and they say, "Oh yeah, well that's all junk volume. That's all junk volume." It's
Mm-hmm.
like, but they're so scared of concepts like that they won't even but they can't push themselves hard enough for the sets that they're doing that they actually would get better results by doing the higher amounts of volume
Oh yeah.
simply because they can't push themselves hard enough for that lower amount of volume for it to make the impact that it needs to.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
it's a sliding scale, and what happens is part of the reason why volume was so popular and was or like large amounts of volume was so popular and worked so well for so many people for so long is because there's a lot of people who cannot push themselves to that next level.
Yeah.
And for those people, they're going to need more volume to get the same amount of overall stimulating reps.
Yep.
So it's like for guys like you and me who can like take ourselves to that next level. Yeah, like we don't need to have as much volume, but for those other people who are harping on it the most,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of those people could actually benefit from doing a little bit higher volume.
Yeah, you have guys saying, anything above 8 sets is going to be, useless. You're not training hard enough. And then, somebody who's been training for a year hears that and they're like, okay, I can't do more than 8 sets. And really, they end up just doing less because they're not even pushing the intensity for those 8 sets to begin with. So they probably would have been better sticking with like 14 sets because the intensity that they bring to all those sets, they need more volume to make
Right.
up for that. But We'll get into all
Exactly.
we'll get all into that in a bit here. What were we talking about? You fucking switching to the dark side?
Oh yeah, yeah. It's something that I don't think will happen, to be completely honest. But one thing I am curious about is like I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, and they said you might as well at least get on testosterone right now because you're going to have to once you get to age like 35 to 40. I'm like, what do you mean? And they said, well, basically, pretty much every person who's living in the Western Hemisphere right now, by the time they get to that age, just isn't producing adequate levels of testosterone. They said whether it's dietary and stuff like that. And I was like, and I'd not heard that statement before, but I was like, I was curious because obviously testosterone levels have dropped quite a bit. So I'm just going to monitor things over the next years, because obviously I'm like 28. So over the next 7 years, I'll monitor it. And I'm curious to see whether it does drop off as rapidly as he seemed to think. Um, but in the end, I'm like,
I think a
I'm
lot of
still
people
obviously
just
producing my own. I'm doing all right. So I don't have any desire to switch over right now.
so you said you got bit, you want to compete again. So I'm assuming you want to compete again naturally.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you don't have any like desire, like I want to go pro, I want to, I want to pursue this, go to the Olympia. Like that's not in your mind right now.
No, no, not an Olympia or anything like that. If I'm being completely honest, because people have asked me, said, why don't you just hop on and then take it to the Olympia? I'm like, you don't understand. It's not as simple as hopping on and
Yeah,
then
no.
all of a sudden your knowledge translates to you being a Mr. Olympia winner. I'm like, you still need insane genetics. You still need like if people don't even realize how much time you need. It's
Yeah,
like
no.
it's like I'm 28. If I was to hop on now, I would not reach nearly the potential that I would have if I'd hopped on at 20. It's like that
Hmm.
you still have time to build up. And in the end, I'm like, even if I started at 17 or something like that, and I was to build for the rest of my life, I don't think that I have the structure that is capable of getting me to that level. I just
Yeah,
don't. Like
yeah.
there are some people that have it. I don't view myself as one of them. They're like, I'm like, I have a like one for one, I have a pretty thick waist. People go, oh well, Arnold had a pretty thick waist. I'm like, yeah, Arnold was also 6'3".
Yeah.
It's like Arnold's 6'3" with around the same waist size as me at 5'9". We're not in the same boat here.
Yeah. So
But it's yeah, like I think people are far too they think gear does far more than it does. And so they assume that with knowledge, if you take gear, you're automatically going to be the best of the best. It doesn't work like that.
yeah, I don't majority of people don't know anything about gear. They don't understand how it works. They think it does way more than it really does. I posted a video the other night. It was a lot of the videos I post are sarcastic and people cannot pick it up. And it's like, it's hilarious because sometimes I'll address it and sometimes I won't even address it just because it's funnier to me just to not address it. And I just see people
Mhm.
freaking out. But I made a video saying I had shit genetics and showed, the pictures for me from 17 to now. And the joke was that, my hair thinned over that time because I have shitty genetics for male pattern baldness. And
Right.
everybody was like, "Oh, you just have a low response to gear, all this shit. Like you just like what do you?" And the reality is that I have a great response to gear. I don't get any side effects. I could tolerate super high amounts relatively fine. There are
Right.
people who respond much worse to gear than me. I just don't have the genetics to be an open bodybuilder. I don't have the genetics to fucking put on that much mass, or maybe I just haven't eaten enough. I don't know, but my genetic
Right.
strength lies in my shape, really, which is why classic physique is good for me. But it's just funny because people are saying over that time span, you have a worse response to gear because I didn't put on 100 pounds of tissue in 5 years, and that's what people expect to happen if you take gear.
I saw it was somebody I was talking to the other day. They had been natural for a long time, built a really good physique, and then they hopped on and then they showed their transformation after I can't remember exactly how long it was. I think it was 4 to 6 months, something like that. And it was a substantial difference. And people were saying, oh, all that just to like barely make any progress, blah, blah, blah. And it was, I think I'd put on probably 20 pounds of quality mass
Wow.
in 4 to 6 months after already having built a really good physique. And so not just some newbie. I'm like, people really have no clue what the difference is. And one thing that I've noticed that really helps to help people see the difference is take video. Video shows far more the differences in somebody's physique than pictures do.
Oh yeah.
Because it's like you have frames of reference all around them as they move around. It's almost like you can see the mass moving around. So
Yeah.
I have a kid who he's put on probably a good quality 8 pounds of muscle mass in the last little while. But his structure obviously it's his structure. It's the same. So I was taking a look. I took a picture of the video of him before and the picture of him after, and I was like, what the heck? They look the exact same. But then when you saw him moving around in video, you're like, okay, that guy's way bigger than he was previously.
Yeah.
It's a it's a weird visual thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, also the pictures, at least the pictures you post, you're always going to post the pictures where you look the best, look the biggest. Like
Right.
for example, the pictures I use in that video, the one where I was 17, the one where I was now, the one where I was 17, I look way fucking bigger in that picture than I actually was. I was,
Yeah,
I was like, there's like a 50 pound difference between those pictures, but really,
right.
it doesn't look like that much just because when I took that picture at the time, I had a fucking good pump and that's just how it was set up. But
Well, that's what's happened. That's what's happened to me almost every time I've gone to one of these influencer hubs. Is I meet with people who I've seen in videos and stuff like that, seen in pictures, and they meet me and they're like, "You have a lot more size than I realized." Because all they do is take amazing pictures in amazing lighting with their arm angled more towards the camera like this, so they look
mm-hmm.
massive in every single. And it's like, and then it's almost like they've convinced themselves that they're bigger than they are,
Yeah, it's an
so that
ego
when you meet
thing.
them, yeah. So then when you meet them in person, it's like, oh, you're way bigger than the rest. Like, or maybe it's there's the other side where you're not just quite as big as you thought you were.
Yeah, yeah. I used to do that when I was younger. As recently, the only photos I would take, especially during prep, is just like straight shot. I need to know exactly how I look. If I don't have an accurate representation of how I look,
Right.
this doesn't benefit me at all. This is just incorrect data. If I look at this, I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, why the fuck do I look so much bigger on this day than that day? It's just because I took it this way. That's not. This is just gonna fuck with my head more. But yeah.
The most humbling experience was right before show. I was getting I didn't know how to post. I didn't know anything. And so I sent a message off to Knable. I was like, "Can you help me out a little bit?" He's like, "Send me a physique update." And he sent me like what he wanted me to do in terms of physique update. Most humbling experience of my life was taking a look back at the video of me trying to pose doing that. And I just looked at myself. I'm like, "You look so average in regular lighting, just doing your random poses, moving through everything." And I was like, dang, like this sucks. Like you're not hiding in any sense. You're just it's just straight up you. And I'm like, ooh, that was a rough experience. But I mean, I feel like it's something everybody should do where they just take and do realistic video of themselves and see exactly where they're at. Because the moment you get under great lights with a pump and start angling yourself towards the camera, you just get an unrealistic view of where your physique is at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Morning check-ins. Those are the most accurate.
Exactly.
Do you think most guys just tend to be smaller in person? The majority of them?
I would say most guys, okay, so this is what I've found. Almost every guy on social media who stays relatively lean year round is much smaller than they appear. Almost all of them. I because I met a ton of them when I
Well,
went to
they're
Alpha Land.
they're just
And
sleepers.
yeah, because but the thing is when you take your shirt off and you have a six pack and
Did you
you
hear what I
have
said?
wait, what'd you say?
I said they're just sleepers.
Yeah, sleeper physiques. No, you're the king of the sleepers now.
I'm the king of sleeper physiques and bro splits. Apparently, I created both.
Dude, I that whole bro split conversation, I'm like, look, I get it. Like in my head, like from a very basic, like if you're talking like super basic understanding, I see what you're saying. Like it would it like it I see how it can make sense in your head. It's like, okay, well, I wouldn't be able to move as much weight as I get further into my sets. Therefore, if I could spread that out and move more weight for each of those movements, then I'm going to induce more hypertrophy. Like I get what you're saying and I get how it makes sense in your head. The problem is that outcome data that we have doesn't show it.
Yeah, I know.
It's like it's like so you can say all these mechanisms that you want, but in the end the outcome data doesn't show it. And what it ends up coming down to is, are you actually inducing mechanical tension? It's not about the amount of weight you're using.
Yeah,
Like
no.
obviously, like people think it's the amount of weight they're using. It's like, no, you're using that amount of weight in order to stimulate mechanical tension. There's a difference. It's like it's not you moved 500 pounds, therefore it's more mechanical tension than you moving 400 pounds. It's how close are you actually getting to failure? That's it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've talked about this so many fucking times. I talk about the same things over and over again because people just, they don't listen. They just keep regurgitating the same thing. The other day, somebody was like, when you break up the volume more, I'll be able to do more weight, for both sessions when I hit chest or whatever. And it's like, that doesn't matter. That's just not
Right.
what builds muscle here. The fact that you're able to use more weight doesn't make a difference if you're still going to failure.
Yeah. It's a poundage argument, which makes sense if you're a strength athlete.
Yeah.
And like poundage, like I get it. Like it seems to make more sense logically. You're moving more pounds, therefore more growth, therefore more. But we've actually taken a look at it. It's like it's similar to when people talk about going into a sauna to increase growth hormone. And it's like you go into the sauna to increase growth hormone because it increases 16 times when you get out of the sauna. It's like it doesn't matter
Well, don't they
because
fucking say that testosterone increases during a workout or something?
yes, yes.
Yeah,
And it's like, but it's like those
doesn't matter.
individual spikes
Yeah,
during the time make no difference to your overall performance or how much you grow in the off time. So it's like it's similar to what people say with Bristol. It's like, sure, like you can talk about these mechanisms, but in the end, if it's not actually resulting to real world outcomes, what the heck does it matter?
yeah,
And that's coming from somebody who religiously would have said like 6 or 7 years ago, yeah, the bro split isn't as good. Like not because I was that well informed, but just because of the fact that in my head it didn't make sense. It's like we have to be able to understand that if it doesn't actually result in practical outcomes, why on earth does your head make more sense than the practice?
okay. Well, let's take a couple steps back here. So
Sure.
let's say you're familiar with evidence-based coaches. Would you consider yourself an evidence-based coach?
Yeah, I would say evidence plus experience, but yeah.
So just a coach. Would you fall? Do you identify with like the science evidence-based whole thing?
I was talking about this with people the other day, and I said it's kind of funny because I don't know how, but somehow I've wound up being put in both categories a little bit. It's like so I have friends on both sides, and some of them just hate each other.
Yeah, I know.
Some of them cannot stand each other, and somehow here I am in the middle, like. "No, I like you. I like you." And I'm like, I'm just watching the fight and I'm just laughing in the background because it's like I I think there are people who don't have the scientific background who try to use the science, and therefore they don't understand the limitations of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, yeah, I do like literature. I like using literature, but I do understand that there are huge limitations to
Mm-hmm.
certain aspects. But when you start combining certain principles from the literature with your own practical conclusions, it's like that's when you start to get into that sweet spot because there are things that we have not examined thoroughly enough, and
Yeah, of
people aren't
course.
people aren't willing to admit that. So unless you don't have a source for that exact thing, I think probably the biggest one that I've seen, and it's funny because more recent stuff is actually kind of pointing more towards it, is the protein argument. That one is just I just laugh when people are like,
Well,
oh, like 1.3 per, oh, actually yes, I should convert to pounds. Oh, zero point 0.6 grams per pound, more than enough. More than enough. And I'm just like,
no, 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 no,
I'm
no, no.
like I have worked with people, and I'm not kidding you. Literally, the only thing we have changed has been their protein level, and they're like, I don't understand what's happening. My workouts are 10 times better. I recover way faster. Like it's
Yeah,
yeah,
I've
it just
always
it boggles my mind that people can't accept that maybe we should go a little bit higher with the protein.
yeah. Well, we'll get all I want to talk about like nutrition and diet. We'll get all deep into that, but what you were saying about that there's limitations of when I forget it, I think it was John Meadows who said I'm glad that I didn't wait until there were studies to prove what I already knew.
Yeah,
And so there's like two sides of the spectrum. We have that whole science evidence-based community, and I think that whole side has like a bad reputation. Both sides have a bad reputation from both sides because
yeah,
on like the
yeah,
bro science spot side, you have people who look at that and they're like, these guys are fucking nerds. You know, they have no experience with everything. They only go by these studies. And then you have the guys who are on, you know, the literature side, strictly like zealots. If it's not a study, if it's not, you know, if they can't read the abstract of a study and it doesn't say exactly what they have heard, you know,
Right.
everything else is bro science. They can't comprehend it. So then these guys are just fucking stupid meatheads. But it's just really the ability to be able to, you know, read this stuff, learn, and have logic, and be able to have just critical thinking and being able to put it into practical application, have experience with it. Because like you said, the whole thing, you know, with protein, if you look at the literature, it says this, but I could tell you from hundreds and thousands of bodybuilders, even though it's anecdotal evidence, you know, anecdotal evidence is still a form of evidence. Maybe if it's not just something that said, you know, it worked for you, but if it worked for thousands of people, that fucking says something. So I could tell you with myself, you know, the most growth I've ever had is pushing 2 grams of protein per pound of body weight, even if I was eating the same amount of calories, you know, with less protein, making up whatever fats or carbs or whatever. The most I've grown is the highest my protein. And a lot of
Yeah.
bodybuilders will tell you the same thing. So, but then these guys will come in and say, you know, well, can't be possible. Literature doesn't support that. It's just because you're on gear. It's just because of that, you know, they're not willing to accept the fact that not everything is set in stone. If there's not a research specifically
Right.
on something that, you know, that it's still possible. And I don't know why they're so stuck on that. Why do you think that is?
So I think it's because people don't like gray. People like black and white, and they want everything to be black and white. And I'm not gonna lie, like every once in a while I'll fall into that camp where I want something to be black and white.
They fall into camps.
But
That's camps. That's the word for it.
yeah, and in the end it becomes it's my team. It's
Yeah.
my team versus your team. And which team's gonna win. And what people will do is I talked about this the other day too, is people don't look to studies to actually learn information. They look to studies to confirm their own biases.
Yep.
So if they believe something, they will go and find the literature to try and support it rather than saying, "Oh, okay, let's take an objective look at what the overall literature says and see if we can come to a conclusion." So I had somebody I was getting really frustrated because I posted about something and then I had a whole bunch of people like they would give me like lists of studies and I would be like, and me being the neurotic guy that I am was like, okay, well, I have to look at every individual study. But the first three that I looked at, they were all wrong. Or like their conclusions from that study was all wrong. And I was like, but me and my hat, I'm like, well, the first three were wrong. Do I really? And then I would say why each one was wrong, and they'd be like, yeah, yeah. Well, what about this one? And then I'd say why it was wrong. Then what about this one? I was like, are you really going to make me keep going through until I get to all 12 of the sources that you listed? Like,
Yeah.
I don't like if the first three were wrong, why do I have to look at the fourth, fifth? And so it's like people really aren't. There are very few people who are actually science based. There are a lot of people who like to use science in order to push whatever it is they want it to push.
And those are the people who don't, I feel like those are people who don't really understand the science to begin with.
Exactly.
They
Well,
understand things from a very, you know, surface level.
right. Well, and even just and I know it's like really really small, but even like because we're obviously referring to it colloquially, but saying the science, it's like okay, well, people don't really understand what science is.
Mm-hmm.
Science is observable, testable, repeatable. Everybody likes to ignore the last part.
Yeah.
Everybody likes to ignore the repeatable part. And that's what ends up happening is they'll find one or two studies and false positives are constant within science. They happen all the time.
Yeah.
That's why when I'm like looking at supplements and stuff, if people are like, well, what about this supplement? It was shown to do this. I'm like, in how many studies? In how many human trials? How many participants? Like, it's like I don't care. I don't care if it happened in one study. It doesn't really matter. Like
Yeah.
because false positives are happening all the time, and that's why we end up developing meta analyses, which obviously are the best we have. But even then, we still have limitations. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like and I get it. We do want things to be black and white, but they just
They're not.
in nutrition and fitness, especially, they're not. There are
Yeah.
some things that are. And that's the thing that I struggle with is people will then take that argument. Not everything is black and white. I'm like, but some things are.
Yeah.
So when you tell me that 4 RIR is just as good as 0 RIR for growth, I'm like, no.
No.
Like that is black and white. It's like it's if you start arguing with me, okay, how about 1 RIR versus 0 IR when it comes to overall fatigue accumulation and within the context of an overall, I'm like, okay, there we can actually have a conversation.
Yeah.
But it's like, but they're then people say that everything is gray when not everything is gray, and that's where
Yeah.
it's you got to figure out where that line is.
Well, it's just about really understanding the mechanisms of everything behind it. A lot of people will look something up, they'll read the study or whatever, and they're just looking for an answer. They don't really understand, what I mean, there's so many things that go into bodybuilding. There's so many variables with everything. So is this study, accounting for all those variables? Is this what happened with, this meta analysis? There's just so much shit. Obviously, it depends what we're talking about. If you're talking about like an exercise or something, obviously it's going to be more black and white, what this movement does. But, in terms
Right.
of, let's say, like just like the protein thing, for example, does this produce more hypertrophy? Does this produce more growth? Who were these studies done on? What were they doing over this time span? How was their training? Like, there's so much shit that is involved in it that it's so hard to get a clear answer. So it's just about understanding the mechanisms and how everything works and being able to read
Right.
the research and, just critically think about it, put it into practice, and, just be able to see how it works. Really. I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know if I'm wording this
No,
correctly.
I completely agree. Like sometimes you do just need to go try something out. Like there are a lot of people who will not try something out simply because they don't have the reference or they think it goes against it. It's like
Mm-hmm.
go try it out and see what happens. And if it makes sense, what you're reading does make sense with what's happening when you go to the gym and you try it out, then sure, you can start coming to a conclusion. But there are a lot of people that will legitimately just not try something.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, at least give it an effort. If it somewhat makes sense. Obviously, they're off the walls things, but the other day I was talking about I think it was lat pull downs, and I was talking about like which portion of the movement like causes the most growth, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And somebody said the top of the movement causes the most growth, and I'm like, well, that doesn't even make sense because the lats can't really do anything up there. I'm like, you
Yeah.
actually end up pawning off a lot of the leverage to other muscle groups. And it's like if you literally just go and you grab onto a lap and you let your shoulders go completely and you just let basically your weight get pulled hard by it, you'll actually feel it pulling on your chest. Like it legitimately goes to everywhere. Like it doesn't actually have anything on the lats. All that it does is maybe your lats are a little bit stretched out, but we already know that stretching does not cause growth. Stretching with actual force causes growth. But if it's not able to produce any force, that's not going to make a difference. So it's like I have all these people that are like, well, no, no, no. I'm like, and so I just went into the gym and I just literally went and showed them in the gym. I'm like, do this before you start talking about it. Like actually go feel what it feels like, try it, and then talk to me about it because people would just go based off of their what their intuition told them or like something that does completely random that shouldn't have been brought in. And it's like I am not a big fan of people. I'm not a big fan of people speaking on hypertrophy if they aren't well experienced in it themselves. I honestly
So
am
all
not.
of all of TikTok.
Yes, I am. It does, and I get it. You don't have to be an IFBB pro or anything like that,
Nah, TikTok
but
is fucking crazy. TikTok.
it is. It's
It's
really
not even
wild.
like obviously you don't have to be IP pro, but the fact that dude, I don't care how much you think you've read, how much you think you've been training for fucking 2-3 years. You do not know more than me. I mean, I've been doing this for a decade. It's just the fact that people will actually convince themselves that they do. Like they'll bring shit up to me as if I haven't already thought about that a million times before. And
Right.
you've been doing this for 2 years. You heard something on TikTok. You don't even understand what we're talking about here. It happened the other day with mechanical tension. It's just there's
I saw your
people are
explanation on
crazy.
that. Yeah. No, I saw your explanation on it, and somebody tagged me. Like I've had people tag me in your videos before, and they'll be like, "Come get this fool" or something like that, and I'll go to the video and I'll be like, "He's right. Like, what do you want me to do?
Yeah.
What do you want me to say here?" And I've seen that there's I don't know if you do, but I'll see like sometimes I'll go to my video, be like comment not there, and I'll be like that makes sense to me. Like if you removed it or something like I'm like I
Dude,
don't like
I block people all the time.
it,
Oh,
I told myself when I first started on TikTok that I would never block anybody, and that did not last.
I probably have thousands of people blocked just because really the reason is just for my own
Sanity.
just
Oh,
protect my fucking energy. It's just like that doesn't mean like it necessarily might aggravate me, but I'll see something, I'm like, this person's fucking stupid. Like I don't even want this person to ever be able to see my videos again, because I just know, like, I just the fact that you're saying this right now, you just have to leave. You can't be here.
right, right,
I don't need you consistently coming here, and I'll see the same people. People will make separate accounts after I block them, and keep trying to come back, because people get upset about it. They'll make another account, be like, I saw
right.
you fucking blocked me. That's why I'm right. And I'm like, so you're not right. It's just like, I'm not even entertain this. Like, there's no point. Like, there's no getting through. I'm not going to sit here and converse with somebody who I don't
Well,
know. You have no fucking relevance to my life, and you have a black profile. Like, this is meaningless. This is a waste of my energy.
right. Well, one thing I started to think about it, and I started to figure it out. I'm like, if I spend an hour going back and forth with this person on this, who I have no idea who this person is, and I do that with this person, but then I also do it with somebody else, and I do it with somebody else. It's like all I'm really doing at this point is taking away from my time. It's like they don't have anything better to do.
Yeah.
Like they don't. It's like they are an account that doesn't even post content. It's like so their entire energy is absorbed in this conversation. Meanwhile, I'm trying to take care of other stuff. It's like so, and I don't. And it's like if somebody has a healthy disagreement with me, I don't care. I really don't. It's when it comes down to the fact that oh, you're a moron because of this, blah blah blah. Like, and then they just start tagging a bunch of people who I like already know agree with me on this
Mm-hmm.
topic, and I'm just like and then like you said, you block somebody and then they make another account and then you block that again and then they just keep going. I'm like,
Yeah.
it's just not, yeah, it's not worth it. But it's every once in a while I find myself getting dragged into that. And then
Mm-hmm.
I'll like there's been times where I legitimately will just delete videos or like put them on private in order to keep me from coming back to it.
I'll delete
Because
that.
I'll just yeah, it's crazy. You get so you're so focused on trying to actually get your point across that you're like, I'm not doing anything productive with my time right now.
Yeah. Like
I
I
need to
already
just
said what my point is in the video. You didn't fucking get it.
yeah,
This is it. I can't sit here and explain this to you over and over again. I said, it's different. Like if somebody like you, responds to the video or something, because you make content, you're going to have an explanation. Now I can respond to a video. We can, explain things, but this is some random motherfucker just commenting, trying to press me, acting like he knows more, like the whole thing with the frequency, people will kind of be like, they'll just be like, wrong, you need muscle protein synthesis last this long. And I'm like, all right, like, I already explained this. I'm just blocking you. Like it's over. Like I'm not. I can't do this. I can't have. And then a bunch of people like start liking it, and they'll like comment under each other, be like, "Yeah, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about." I'm like, all right, I can't even like allow this to happen here, because it's just gonna, more people are gonna feed into it, and now people are going, because then people will come into your comment section and like convince each other and talk to themselves like you're wrong or something, and then it creates like this army of people in the comments. You ever have that happen?
oh yeah, yeah. No, it's happened, and the funny part is, if it was being said by somebody else, they wouldn't bother.
Yeah. No, that's why they tag me or you or somebody else.
Yeah,
They want to validate it. And it's crazy because it's like, really, it shouldn't even be like that. Whether you trust me, you more, or me, or fucking Ryan or Paul or whatever, like you should be researching this stuff and looking into it. You shouldn't
right.
just go by, what Seb says or what you say is fucking what's the word? God's word? God's, what did they call it? Gospel. It's gospel, the gospel.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Like that's it. If Paul says this, that's it. Not saying Paul is not extremely intelligent, but it's like you should understand why Paul is saying that and looking into it, rather than just
Yeah.
regurgitating it nonstop and not even, really understanding. That's how all this shit gets taken out of context too.
Right. No, it's yeah. I think TikTok is a pretty you always talk about the Dunning-Kruger effect on it,
Yeah.
but I think TikTok is a perfect example of how a little bit of knowledge can be a bad thing. And
You see
and
what it's
that's
done to the entire fitness
it,
industry.
it's wild. It's like it's a good I'm really glad, I'm really happy that people are understanding things a little bit better. But in the end, what ends up happening is as soon as somebody understands one thing, they think they're an expert on the entire topic.
Yeah.
And that's not to put me or you on a pedestal and be like we are the experts or anything like that.
No.
But in the end, it's like we all have a lot to learn, and some people have a lot more to learn than they think.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'll have a video, and I'll see somebody come on and comment on that video, and I'll know that another creator made a video on that topic an hour ago, and they'll be like, "You're a moron because this and this," and I'll know they took it directly from that video that they just watched an hour ago, and
Hmm.
I'm like, okay, so up until an hour ago, you would have believed the same thing,
Yeah.
but now anybody who hasn't seen that video is a moron. I'm like, this is just, it's wild
They
that
hear
people
one
just,
guy, that's what he says. It's gospel. Like, like
and
I
anybody who
could give you
hasn't
a
heard,
million fucking examples.
anybody who hasn't updated their ideas in the last hour is an idiot.
Like fucking dude, Ryan posted a video the other day. If you're doing more than 9 sets, you're not training hard enough. And then in a video, I said, if you're gonna do a bro split, if you have the work capacity, you may be able to do 11 to 12 sets. We're talking about a 2 to 3 set difference here. And then
Right.
people 2 to 3 sets. If you're telling me that you can't do more than 9 sets, that's a set in stone number. You're not training hard enough. That's fucking ridiculous. But people came on and they're like, okay, well, there's no way you could do 11 sets because if you're doing more than 8 to 9, you're not training hard enough. You're talking about 2 sets here. There's so many
Yeah.
variables. What exercises are we doing? What muscle are we training?
Right.
Fucking what is your experience? What is your work capacity? You cannot tell me that once I go over 9 sets that it just becomes ineffective. It's not just that black and white.
Well, people don't realize it's a curve, right? So
Yeah.
what happens is you have your first set, which is obviously like your first set to failure is going to be the most stimulating. And then your second set's going to be a little bit stimulating, third, and it like slowly tapers off over time. But that's what they don't realize. It slowly tapers off. And where that exact cutoff is, we don't know exactly where it is.
No.
Like some people could fully maximize the progress that they need in a session in 5 sets. But then there could be somebody else who fully maximizes it by the time they get to 13 or
Mm-hmm.
14. Like we don't know exactly where that amount is. And even once you start to get past that point, it's like, okay, now it's going to slowly level off and dip down. It's like, if you go past that number, you can call it junk volume. But in the end, it's like, if you're not sure, you being more safe than sorry might not be a bad idea for you.
Yeah.
So it's like,
Well, a lot of people
it
also take
because the
these.
amount of, it's not going to like completely destroy you for any follow-up session that you could possibly have. And the other thing that I don't think people take into account is you're talking about in the context of a bro split, right?
Yeah.
Like as far as the 11 sets or whatever.
Yeah. Doing
Yeah.
11,
So if
12
you're
sets.
yeah, so if you're talking about it in the context of a bro split, if you did happen to overtrain just a little bit, guess what? You have 7 days to recover.
Yeah.
So if you're overtraining a little bit and you have 7 days to recover, it's not going to absolutely destroy you. Now, obviously, there's ridiculous volumes like 30, 40 sets. Like you
Yeah.
just don't need that. But
There's a point of diminishing returns, but people act like this is going to hurt you. And for one, they call this shit junk volume. And I understand a lot of beginners, you could do like when I was younger, did a bunch of junk volume, wasn't aware of it. But at this point, when you have experience training for so long, you know what junk volume is. I know if I'm
yeah,
doing those 12 sets, I know if this is junk volume or if everything's firing and these are still stimulating sets. I know when I'm doing junk volume at that point. So it's just funny to me when people come and be like, you don't train hard enough. You're doing junk volume. Be like,
right.
you have no fucking idea what I'm doing. But it's like people think, like he says, like the whole thing with 9 sets, like maybe 9 sets or this amount, this might be, the senso number, the minimal amount or whatever. People don't realize there's a difference between, doing a minimal amount. You don't need more than this, but that doesn't mean you can't always benefit from more.
Right.
And
Right.
people
No,
think that, why would
I
I ever go
completely
past
agree.
that? It's not going to hurt you. It's not always going to hurt you. Really, there's more context there, but like a bro split, like you said, if we're doing a couple extra sets, doing those extra sets may benefit you. It doesn't mean, it's necessarily always going to be just junk volume.
Right. And the fact of the matter is, like we've talked about before, we still have so much to learn in this area.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like in the end, yes, there's a range, but we don't know exactly where that is. And that's the gray. That's the
Yeah.
gray that we're talking about. It's not black and white on this exact topic. But I'm guessing that from the way that you just described that, you probably auto-regulate pretty hard when you do your sessions, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think people do this enough.
Mm-hmm.
Or I shouldn't say that. I think that there
It's
once you get
always
to a certain
generally
level,
around the same area though, but yes.
right, right. But once you get to a certain level, like you were talking about how like when you're firing on all cylinders, like you're feeling good,
Yeah, like I could
you like
tell
you
when,
know whether it's
like
going
my
to be
quads stop firing after doing quads.
exactly. Like the other day I went in and I was doing a leg workout, and I'd only planned to hit like 6 overall sets for the quads, and I was like, I'm feeling really good and I'm loving this workout. Like I'm just gonna hit a couple more. Like, and that's the thing. It's like people will ask me about like what's your mesocycle, macrocycle, microcycle, like all these like intricate details. Like we never do
I don't
this.
even use those fucking words. I don't even.
I have never used them, and I don't think if you're going to, I don't have an issue with it. I'm not telling you like how to train or anything like that. But there are a lot of people that are focusing on that minutia that just don't need it.
It's funny
They need
because
us.
like there's all this stuff, the science stuff. It's like a lot of the the kids get into fitness. This is what they hear and shit. And it's funny to me because the way that I told you, like I was brought up in bodybuilding, I was brought up by like bodybuilders, like meatheads. And I remember when all this shit started to get popular, they would just fucking like they would make fun of people for like, oh, you fucking nerds, fucking they just hate that shit, because they're just fucking old school bodybuilder meatheads. So
Yeah.
it's just funny how popular it is now when I hear all this shit and I just think of that. I'm like, oh, all these fucking guys just hate this shit. All these
Right, right. No, I like a good combo, if I'm being completely honest. And I think I honestly don't know. I honestly could not figure out when it happened, but all of a sudden people started like putting me in this weird into like the crazy super optimal crowd. And I've never done that. I was trying to figure out where it came from. And I think what it came from was the fact that I was dissecting literature on more
yeah,
nutritional
yeah.
aspects and then also training. And then they were like, and then that's why I started doing so many things where I would just show intensity on my
Mhm.
sets, where I would show me working hard. Because I
Yeah,
was I was basically trying to point out to people like it doesn't like it doesn't matter if you're not training to this level. If you're not
yeah.
training this hard, it does not matter. Like worry about this first, and then you can start talking about biasing these certain fibers on these certain movements.
Yeah. Well, I was never drawn into that crowd just because of the content that I made. People kind of put me like in
Yeah,
the crowd against it. People started to put me in like a bro science kind of
it's the
camp, I
black and
guess,
white.
but it's not people. I think people use the word bro science when they're talking about things they don't understand.
Right.
Like we come back to this. I just feel like protein's always like the greatest example. People will say like that's bro science, but is it really bro science when we have, anecdotal evidence is still evidence. We have thousands of people that could testify to this working. We could see it working. So it's just understanding the mechanism of how protein works, having practical application with it, using logic and critical thinking. Is that bro science now? Because there's not a specific study I could cite you to prove what I'm saying to you. Is that just what bro science is now?
There's a I think it was a little bit ago, but I made a statement to somebody where I made a statement on one of my videos where I said sometimes bro science is just science that hasn't caught up to us yet.
Yes, this is like exactly what John Meadows. The whole thing.
And people were like, "Oh, like that's stupid." Like, no, they're like we have I'm just like, look, I'm like if you were to be the most scientific person in this sphere 40 years ago, I'm like, you would not have like half of the knowledge that we have now. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, and there was a lot of people who were doing things like that would have been considered bro science at that point that we've now figured out over time works really well, like you said with the John Meadows thing. So it's like there are some things that have been studied in depth, and we know okay, like these things are pretty set in stone. If you're not training this way, it's probably dumb. But there are a whole lot of other things that people are not willing to admit fall into that gray area. And that's why when people try to make you out to be the bro scientist, people try to make me out to be the scientist. And it's like, and then they try to pit us against each other. I'm like, you don't understand that Burka and I agree on 99% of things.
Yeah.
Probably the things that we would disagree the most on are things like genetic potential when it comes to natural bodybuilding. Like I think those are probably the things that we've disagreed on the most. And even then, I've like kind of hedged a little bit closer to you as I've started to see stuff over the years
Yeah.
where I'm taking a look at some people that I'm working with who I know are 100% natural,
Yeah.
and I'm like, holy crap! Like if you were to stay natural for the next 10 years and continue to build, I, you'd be pretty freaky.
Yeah. Yeah. It's insane. But again, people, I think put me into that camp because I think you're in that camp, like you said, because you cite literature and stuff. I never do that. I just use what I know, how I understand the mechanisms and my experience, and just because I'm able to explain how it works. so I could form this
Right.
conclusion and explain to you. But because I don't show, a literature or study, on the screen, the fucking PMID, they love that shit, then
Mhm.
I'm not the optimal scientist guy because I'm not showing them the study to reference to prove exactly what I'm saying. So
Right.
now, now it's questionable when I feel like you put a lot of work into your videos. It
I've
takes me,
put
I'll
less
take like 2 minutes to make a fucking video.
I've put less and less work into it over time as I've realized that the return for the amount of time that I was putting into them was not worth it.
Yeah, no,
Like I
you
used to,
just gotta bang it out.
if you take a look at some of my videos from like when I first started, I had like flying in graphics and like things zooming in
Yeah.
and like oh man, like it was more like YouTube formatting on TikTok. And I was like, and then I started putting out more videos that were super quick content, and some of them started going viral. And I was like, okay, so I started doing like kind of an analysis of the time that I was spending, and I was just wasting. I was wasting days and days, weeks of editing videos when I could just be putting out this content quicker, and people would take it just as well.
Yeah. I don't think
But
people don't realize that on TikTok that it's all about just consistency, putting out a lot.
assuming you actually have something decent to say,
Yeah. Yeah. Saying putting out something decent, useful content is just a numbers game too. Just a numbers game.
right?
It's not like Instagram where, it's once a day or, a couple times a week. You're not gonna post on Instagram 3 times a fucking day. Because if you did, I would unfollow you.
Mm-hmm.
But on TikTok you could do that. And then TikTok
Yeah,
also, you get videos from like, a week ago, to I'll see videos from like a month ago. So there's just always shit people are seeing. If you put it out a month ago, people might see it, the next month or 2 months later. So it's good to have a ton of
right.
content out there. But let's go back to the thing you said about the natural potential there. Cause I have made videos and you'd be like, oh, I don't know. So because
Yeah.
I've said before, the first person I ever trained with was this kid, Jarrett Palmer, in high school. This is when I first joined the YMCA. I saw this motherfucker, and he was big as fuck. He was 17. And by now, I'm telling you right now, if that kid would have actually pursued bodybuilding, like actually took it seriously, ate his meals and stuff, hopped on gear eventually, he would have been like fucking Ronnie Coleman. It was the craziest shit I've ever
Right.
seen. And
Right.
so like the first thing I was introduced to at the gym was a motherfucker with insane elite genetics. Like I'm telling you, this guy would come in and bench 405 and like just how like they would just like not even know how to bench properly. Like it's like, how are you doing
Yeah.
this? And it's just and I would hang out with him. He would eat like an apple and oatmeal. He would eat like 2,000 calories a day. He literally ate like his mom was like super, healthy, nutritious food. They would barely just eat. So I'm just like, how the fuck does this guy look like this? Just insane genetics. So just being introduced to that from the start and then playing football, being in the weight room. I don't know. You played soccer, so you probably weren't around, guys. You said like benching and stuff, but a lot of
Right.
these kids, especially, I'll say right now, fucking black guys, crazy genetics. Like you don't realize like a lot of these guys can look fucking insane, like way better than other guys with gear and with not even doing the proper steps. So now you take somebody with those genetics, give them even if they follow their diet half-ass or they do it all the way and they actually learn how to train, they do that for years on end, do it for 10 years. What do you think is going to happen? They're going to look fucking insane. They're going to look
Yeah.
way better than what you could ever, think a natural would be able to get. So I know you disagree with me though.
So I think I probably have a little bit more limitation in my head than you do, but I will say I have significantly shifted over in the amount that I think is possible because I think there's a lot of stuff that people don't realize. Like the other day I did a video on a guy who he's 42 years old. He's been competing for a long time, and I think he was. And if you look at him, if you look at him posing and stuff like that, he looks freaky. Like he
Yeah.
does. Like I'm not going to deny that. But he's on stage at 5'8", 185 pounds. And it's like a lot of times people don't realize it's like if you have the right proportions and the right shape, it's like that is not an unheard of number.
You said he's on
But
stage
nobody,
5'8", 185.
yeah.
He was
And there's
heavier
like
than me.
that's yeah,
Yeah.
which is big, obviously.
Yeah.
But in the end, if you're 42 years old, been training your entire life for this, and you have pretty good sized legs, it's like that's going to make a huge difference there.
Mm-hmm.
And and I took a look at this guy and I assessed him as natural, and people were not happy about it. It
No.
was they were really upset, and it was like people cannot get it through their heads that they're like 5'8", 230 pounds shredded is not happening. Like let's like I think we could probably both agree there,
Yeah,
right?
no fucking dude. That's fucking no.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like there are certain limits where it's just like it's outside of physiological human possibility without gear. And it's like I think there's a lot more gray area in there than people realize. And so I'll get people saying, "Oh, is this guy on gear?" And I'm like, I don't know. And they're like, "Wait, but he looks like he could be natural." I'm like, I still don't know because there are people who will take gear and look natural their entire life,
People
and
just
there are
don't
people who will not
understand
take gear and look enhanced.
how much a
Yeah.
role genetics play. Like they
Right.
don't understand. People will look at shoulders. Oh, his shoulders are too round. They don't realize some guys just have great shoulder genetics. You've seen guys
Yeah.
that are like fucking, 18 years old, not big at all, and they just have super round delts. Like they're small, but they have super round delts. It's just a genetic thing. You've guys who are like you said, that guy that's 42, and people just think once you hit 35, you can't look, you're just testosterone are just going to tank and you cannot look like that when you're
Yeah.
40. When that's not true. There's guys who are 40 and have perfectly fine testosterone levels, have been training for 2 decades. And what do you think they're going to look like after two fucking decades of living a bodybuilding lifestyle and having good genetics to have a higher testosterone level in the first place? They're obviously going to look pretty fucking crazy.
Right. And people have asked me, "Have you hit your genetic potential? Have you hit your genetic potential?" I'm like, I haven't even scraped it.
No.
I'm 20, I'm 28. I'm 28 and I've only been lifting in a more hypertrophy oriented context for maybe 5 or 6 years.
Mm,
I'm like, I'm like, I won't hit my peak. If I continue to stay at it hard, I'm like, I will not hit my peak until 38, 39. Like this,
yeah.
like we know that people can build muscle well up into these age ranges and do it productively. It's
Yeah.
not, and then people lift for 2 years, assess themselves at 2 years of lifting, maybe not even lifting that well, and then assume anybody bigger than them is on gear. And I'm just like, that's an absolutely crazy mentality to have.
Yeah. I don't know why people are like it's like I know why people are like that, but it's just so hard for me to perceive because I was never like that. I
Yeah.
when I was
Well,
younger, I
it
never.
helps when you're a 17-year-old jacked guy in high school.
Yeah, yeah. Because then that at that time, yeah,
Although,
too. Like I was 16, I looked like that, and all these guys are like, "This guy's not natty." This guy, I'm like, that guy's fucking 15 years older than me, and I look like this at 16. You're telling me that guy couldn't possibly be natty? I don't believe it. It just that's how I always saw it.
okay, so you don't have to answer you don't I guess you don't have to answer currently where he's at right now. But I'm not gonna lie, one of your guys that I saw, I was like it until more recently, I wouldn't have thought it was possible that he could be natural, which is Austin.
Austin's natural, yeah,
Yeah, that's crazy.
yeah,
I think that's wild. But part of the reason why I'm more capable of accepting it now than I would have been in the past is because of the fact that I found an Austin.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Like
dude.
I
Austin,
got
yeah.
I have an Austin client right now where I'm like, holy crap, like where how like it's just mind blowing that they can put on muscle that fast at that age.
These motherfuckers exist. Yeah, Austin been training for like maybe 3 years now, a little over 2 years,
Yeah.
something like that. Like not long at all. It's fucking actually insane. I mean, I don't know what he was, if he like played sports before that, maybe if he like did some type of I'm sure he did some type of exercise. I don't know, but as far as I know,
Right.
he's been like religiously training for about 2 to 3 years now, and yeah, I mean, since I started working with him, he has just fucking blown up, and you could see how well, like how fast his physique changes when he just went on some trip to Colorado for a shoot or something, and I guess he like barely ate or whatever. His diet was fucked up. He looked super flat, and he got back on the diet after a week being back, and you just see the fullness that has shifted within that week is just like insane. It's just that it's genetics at the same time. But I had Riley too. I don't know, you remember Riley?
Yeah, I remember Riley.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Riley passed away, but
Yeah, I
dude,
was sorry
Riley,
to hear that.
yeah, it's fucking crazy. But with that being said, Riley was 19. But Riley started when he was 17, and that was before I worked with him. But you look at Riley when he was 15 years old, he looks fucking insane for a 15-year-old. They're insane.
Wait, so he was only 19?
Yeah, he was 19.
Oh, I just assumed that he was like 23, 24, 25.
Nah, Riley was 19. Riley was 19 when he passed away. It was crazy. He would have
That's
been
insane.
he would have been fucking top of the Olympia, if not one Olympia,
Oh
100%.
yeah. Yeah, he
Just
would yeah. Like
yeah.
there's people that you can just see, you just know
It's like he had
what their
like,
potential is.
yeah, I would say he had like Lee Priest genetics, like just fucking huge, 15
Yeah.
years old. And it's like, But people will like, I saw like after he passed away, like, somebody sent me like a Reddit forum about him because people are on Reddit, the Reddit motherfuckers. And they
Yeah.
had like pictures of him when he was 14 to 15, just talking about him. Like, yeah, this guy was abusing gear, like all this crazy shit. And I was just reading, I'm like, what the fuck? Like, in all reality, like, what normal person would come to the conclusion that a 14 or 15-year-old is using steroids? Like, in what world is that? Like, what are the chances of that actually happening? Wow, who is giving this kid gear to begin with? Where's he finding real gear? Just like, what are the chances of that ever really even happening to begin with?
Right. Well, and you also have to take into account response time too.
Yeah.
So it's like you think that he's 14 or 15 on gear. Well, obviously you don't grow the muscle immediately. So you pretty much are saying you thought he was on gear at 12 or 13.
Yeah.
Like, so it's like, how far back are we going to go here?
Yeah. Oh, his dad was giving him gear since he was a child. Like, what are you? You just have to be so far out of touch of reality to be saying that shit. If you're talking about a 14 or 15-year-old, it's like, come on, like, I get he looks insane, but like, you gotta have to accept it at this point. He's fucking 14.
Right. If you want to lose brain cells, go on the Reddit Natty or Juice.
I know. Oh my god, it's fucking
Oh,
dude.
it's
Austin's. I always see Austin on there. It's ridiculous. And then they'll come at
oh,
me too. They'll be like, "Yeah, his coach is a lying fucking scumbag. He's lying about his name." I'm like, these motherfuckers, dude. Those
they're
those those guys are
crazy.
the worst. They're the worst. Those guys live in
They
like caves under the
it
ground.
got it got to the point where I was seeing some of the comments. I was like, this has to be a joke, but they're all serious.
Dude, the
It's
shit they post in there is absolutely mind blowing. Like what they think. Like they'll post like celebrities who like aren't even big, just have abs. Like, oh, this guy's no fucking way you could look like that. It's just their reasoning behind everything is just so incorrect. It's just fucking. It just blows my mind every time. It blows my mind
right.
because I'm
And
like,
if somebody doesn't fit their criteria that they put for other people, they'll just switch it.
mhm.
They'll just switch it to something else. And I'm like, you guys are just go spend half of this effort actually working and see what happens. Just try for a little bit.
Yeah. And then we have the guys who have been training for like as long as I have, like 10 years, but in that whole time span, they did shit, with mediocre effort. They never ate enough food. Their training sucks. And then they don't want to acknowledge that. They refuse to acknowledge that. They said,
Right.
I was doing everything I can. And then they have a mediocre physique after 10 years. So then they think, this guy can't look like that in 5 years. It's like, this guy could be doing, everything way more efficiently than you ever were, but you just refuse to accept the fact that you could be doing things way better than you are.
Right. There was a guy that I was working with online, and he wasn't happy with his physique, and he'd been working out for 10 years, and he was not far from me, maybe like a 45-minute drive or so. And so finally I was just like, look, I'm gonna take you to the gym, okay? Like, we're gonna go to the gym, we're gonna get in a workout. We got in a workout, and he'd never ever experienced a workout like that before in his life. And I'm like, this is the level that you have to bring to the gym if you actually want to see progress. You've been working out for 10 years, but really what you've been doing is you've been going to the gym for 10 years.
Yeah.
You haven't actually been working
Which
out
is
for 10
that's the
years.
majority of people. If we're talking about like just the general population of people who go to the gym, it's like, yeah, the majority of people do shit wrong forever.
Yeah. Yeah. And it blows my mind that people go into the gym day after day, week after week, year after year to see no progress. And
Mm-hmm.
and then when they get frustrated and stuff like that, I understand, but are you going to do something about it, or are you just going to complain about it?
Yeah. Most people are just gonna complain. People
Yeah.
like to be comfortable. Hold on. I'll be right back. Let me get back. I want to go into training.
All right.
What is going on, guys? I hope you're enjoying the podcast. And if you aren't subscribed to the channel already, make sure you fucking do so. Now, before we move on here, I want to show you something real quick, and that is the raw whole food bars. Now, I haven't really talked about these or posted about them at all, really. And with me being an athlete of Raw and Revive, I like these bars a lot. And oftentimes I get questions, how do you eat when you're on the go? When you're traveling, let's say you're moving, across country, wherever the fuck you're going, you're going to Disney World, you got a U-Haul, you got a pickup truck, whatever. you may not want to pack all your food and eat your meals on the road. Maybe you're not a competitive bodybuilder. Maybe you're just an average lifestyle person. And I have clients ask me this a lot, what are good options to eat on the road? And I think this is one of the best options you can go for. Obviously, I would advise you to bring your meals, but, instead of opting for, your standard protein bars or the bars you see in stores, a lot of those have a lot of shit in them. They're not the best. And this isn't necessarily a protein bar, but it is a bar that is composed of just strictly, whole food ingredients. It only has the ingredients in here are just dates, peanuts, honey, egg white protein, non-fat milk powder, cocoa powder, and sea salt. So that's literally it. That's all that's in this bar, and it is fucking great. I love these things. I've only had the chocolate ones, honestly, but they are great. I love them. It's 260 calories. It is 37 grams of carbohydrates, 7 grams of fat, and 13 grams of protein. So again, it's not a protein bar. You get a couple of these, you can get your protein in. Now, I'm not saying this is a substitution necessarily for a meal, but if you're on the go, you need a snack, you need a way to get some extra calories in, these are great. Definitely check them out. Use code SEB, and if you like them, let me know. If you plan on traveling, you're going to fucking moving across the country, going to Disney World, maybe order a box, have them on the road with you so that, you have a better snack alternative to resort to when you get hungry. But with that being said, let's hop right back into the podcast here. You're married, right?
I am.
How long you been married for?
Dude, don't put me on the spot like this.
Oh, wow.
Like 7 years, I think. No, 6. 6 going on 7, I think. We got married on, yeah, it's been a while. So we got married on December 31st. So I always get confused as to which year it is, just because it messes with my mind because it's so close to the new year.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think 6 going on 7.
So you were 22.
I was young. Yeah.
You had a wedding?
Sorry?
Did you have a wedding?
Yeah, it was halfway through my senior year.
Wow. So how long have you been together total?
We were together for 2 years before getting married. So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
You got into that.
Yeah, we both come from a conservative Christian household, so it's pretty normal for people to get married younger. And
Yeah.
we both knew where we were headed in life, so we're like, why not?
And she's into like training and stuff too, right?
The funny thing is she wasn't when we got married. So like she wasn't into it at all. She thought she was just not even interested at all. And then it was like randomly out of nowhere, about a year into our marriage, she's like, I want to take the gym seriously. Like I want to go to the gym. I'm like, do you actually want to go to the gym, or do you want to go to the gym? She's like, no, I really want to go to the gym. I've never seen anybody do a more 180 switch. Cause like I'm not kidding you. From that point on, she has not looked back. It hasn't been like, oh, like this month is nice. Completely dedicated ever since. So it was pretty sweet.
That's awesome. Real quick before we dive into training here.
All right.
What the fuck does TNF stand for?
So it's my business. My business is T Nutrition and Fitness. Originally, I was going to name it Twinem Nutrition and Fitness, which is my last name. But I had a buddy who was helping me start up my business, and he was like, "Don't make it your name." He's like, because then if you want to pass it off to somebody else, it's less confusing, and they can do whatever they want with it. So rather than taking it as my name, Twinem, I just put it as T Nutrition and Fitness, and it's my coaching business.
Okay, gotcha. That makes sense. All right. Okay, so let's dive into training here. You see, the first thing I want to talk about is we see a lot of people will stay in videos or just, commonly you'll hear people make this argument that they train for aesthetics, not strength. What do you think about that?
Okay, so
what's the difference between training for strength versus training for hypertrophy?
So the main differences that I see in training for strength versus hypertrophy is strength. All you care about is moving a weight from point A to point B. And you don't really care about whether you're getting certain muscles recruited. You don't really care about overall look. All you care about is, are the judges going to say yes or no? If we're talking about powerlifting strength, because that's what a lot of people mean when they say strength.
Yeah.
And so what they'll do. Yeah, so what they'll do essentially, and this is why I've tried to explain to people that powerlifting is not good for hypertrophy, is you're basically trying to avoid hypertrophy.
Yep.
In a lot of sense, because you want to be as small as possible in order to move the most amount of weight possible, unless you're a heavyweight. So it's like, so if you're taking a look at it, you're making your legs wider, you're bending over more, you're making sure your hip doesn't go quite as far down to minimize the amount of quad stimulus and to
Hmm.
bring the glutes into it more. Like you're basically trying to do the opposite.
You're trying to
But they
use
think,
leverages to make the movement the easiest to move more weight.
yeah, exactly. And I think Frank Zane put it the best. I think it was him that said, uh, when you're training for strength, you're trying to move as much weight as possible with as little effort as possible. And when you're a bodybuilder, you're trying to move as little weight as possible with as much effort as possible.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a really interesting way of putting it. But for a long time, I subscribed to the power building theory, where I was like, oh yeah, like you do power building, you do powerlifting style lifts to get yourself stronger, and then you do hypertrophy lifts in order to make the muscle bigger. So I started off powerlifting, then I went into power building, and then I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna let go of it entirely. I'm gonna go straight into more hypertrophy oriented training. I'm not going below 5 reps. I'm making sure that I'm focusing in on the muscle, mind muscle connection through every movement, doing all this thing. I'm never going back to power building.
Yeah.
It's just my results have just been so much better.
So what do you
Like
think people mean when they say they train for aesthetics, not strength?
typically when I see people say that they train for aesthetics, not strength, it means I'm gonna stay skinny.
Yeah, it means I don't know
Like
how to train
or eat or
or eat.
eat.
Yeah. Yeah. Or
Yeah,
eat.
like
That's
typically when I see somebody say I train for aesthetics, what it means is they're relatively genetically gifted teenager in terms of muscle insertions, and they
yeah.
have a relatively small waist, but they don't
They
want
love
to.
Ziz.
Yeah, and they don't want to put in the work as far as eating and training in order to get bigger.
Hmm.
And they view just being lean and having a small waist as aesthetic, which in the end, it's like
Well, they'll
if
use
we're
that.
talking
They'll use that.
bodybuilding, no.
Yeah. No, they'll use that statement as like a justification for why they're not stronger.
Right.
But
No, I
really,
I, I agree 100%. It's
but
it's
really,
a it's if they say I see people do the same thing for strength too. They're like, well I train more for strength anyways. They're using that as an excuse to not look quite as good through the process.
hmm.
And unless you are a competitive power lifter, it's like, okay, well, I can still deadlift over 500 pounds. I can still squat over 400 pounds. Like, it's like, well, why does the fact that you're putting on 5 pounds onto your bench mean anything? Like,
Yeah.
what are you trying to accomplish here? Unless you are an actual power lifter.
Hmm.
And I think people will often they'll knock whatever training style they don't do because because they just want the easiest route for themselves.
Yeah. People like to
But
validate what they're already doing.
right, it was very, I'm not gonna lie, it was very hard for me to let go of the idea of not being lean. That was tough for me.
Hmm.
I'm still like having a tough time with that as well. Because right now I'm the fattest I've ever been right now, which I know is a little weird to say because I'm not like a fat person, but I'm watching my abs be less clear. I'm watching like my chest not be quite as defined and stuff like that. And it's like it's hard for me to get over that mentality of this is what's necessary in order for you to take your growth to the next level. But I mean, it's very clear when I see myself that I am getting bigger, but I'm much less aesthetic at the current moment. But in the long term, will be more aesthetic overall.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course. I think
That's tough.
a lot of people, for some reason, they think that when you're training for hypertrophy or training for aesthetics, that getting stronger isn't a byproduct of that.
Hmm.
They stick with like you said, how Frank Zane said that trying to use the lightest weight possible and make it the hardest. I don't think that's always the case is using the lightest weight possible. Because if that's the sense, we'd all be doing super high reps, right? Uh,
Oh, no, no. Yeah, no, no, I don't agree 100% with the statement. I was
no,
more
no, no, no.
talking about the idea of like focusing in on the muscles.
Yeah, executing with intent. I always say this, but so
Right.
when you train for aesthetics, training for hypertrophy, which is fucking the same thing as training for aesthetics, because you can't train for aesthetics. Like you can't train to make your fucking waist smaller or whatever. I guess maybe you
Yeah.
could, depending fucking who you are. If you're obese, your waist gets smaller. But um, yeah, when you train for hypertrophy, as long as you're executing within intent, emphasizing on the muscle, moving, with the target muscle, obviously, because, like there's a huge difference between benching as a bodybuilder versus benching for powerlifting, right? So
Yeah.
obviously, with that being said, you're still training the specific way. You're still going to progressively overload and get
Right.
stronger. Training that way isn't an excuse to not, try to, move up and weight to get stronger. You should still be doing that.
Right. Well, I think people mistake the idea of strength within a movement versus strength of muscles. Because
Yes. This is
if you're training, like I'm sorry, like even though I can't necessarily set up and bench, I probably couldn't. If I tried to, I wouldn't be able to bench 360 right now, which is what my best was before I stopped doing powerlifting movements. But I would argue like very, very heavily that I'm stronger overall right now than I was back then. It's like I
yeah.
was just more in tune with the movement. I had better technique. I had a better neural connection with that particular movement.
It's just adaptation to it.
Exactly. It's like, but my chest is stronger. My
Hmm.
triceps are stronger.
This is why I
My
said, yeah,
everything else is stronger.
a long time ago, maybe like I don't even know how long ago it was, a while ago. I made a video saying that most bodybuilders are stronger than powerlifters. And
Ooh,
that, that triggered a lot of them. Why can't they
yeah.
move this much weight? What a lot of people will say that bodybuilders are weak because they don't see them, benching 600 pounds or whatever, which there's not a single fucking open bodybuilder that's weak by any means. It doesn't exist. They are all extremely fucking strong. But
Right.
it's because, the way that a bodybuilder will move weight versus a powerlifter. Powerlifter is making that movement as easy as they can to get the weight up so they can, would do their fucking sport when they're win their
Yeah.
competition. It's about making the movement as easy as you can using leverages to move more weight from point A to point B. Now, if I make
Mhm.
that movement as hard as I can, get the most range of motion, try to, emphasize more on my quads, I'm more locked in. I'm have a slower, negative, all that stuff. The way that a bodybuilder would perform the movement is going to be much more difficult. So if they're both doing, let's say they could both do the same amount of weight, the bodybuilder is arguably the stronger one that
Mhm.
has a stronger
I see what you're
chest.
saying.
You see what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
if I could power, you could bench, 400 pounds for 6 reps, the way that powerful bench, and I could do it as a bodybuilder. The way that I'm moving it as a bodybuilder, it's arguable that my chest is stronger. No, overall.
I would say probably, yeah, if you're taking a look at the individual muscle group, the
Yes.
argument that it's not as strong it'd be pretty tough to argue that. Especially, and here's where I think here's where it honestly starts to kind of drive me crazy is I have a lot of bodybuilders who, sorry, not bodybuilders, powerlifters who follow me, and they'll start telling me how to train for hypertrophy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, your whole goal is to not get as big. It's like, and they're telling me to use training methods that they use. And like, I think this is one of the biggest disconnects between bodybuilders and powerlifters is powerlifters often use like 4 RIR, 5 RIR.
Yeah.
It's like
They
they
don't want
do
to go to
that all the
failure.
time. And then they're like, oh, well, you shouldn't be doing it. You shouldn't be going to failure because you're just overly accumulating fatigue and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, guess what? I'm like, the reason I'm growing is because I'm going closer to failure. And the reason that you're not growing and the reason that you're getting stronger without growing is because you're staying further away. It's like you're accomplishing what you're trying to accomplish in terms of your sport, but that's also the reason why you're not growing. That's also the
Yeah.
reason why you're not as muscular. It's
Yeah.
like so good type of training for what you're doing, but
Like you
very
said,
different types of training.
powerlifting is all about just becoming extremely proficient in this movement.
Mm-hmm.
Becoming extremely good at bench, extremely good at squat, extremely good at deadlifts. They, however they want to do it, making it the easiest for them to move from point A to point B to move
Yeah,
the heaviest load. Now, like you said, it might be
good
harder to
good
measure.
bodybuilders. Yeah, but you're 100% right. Good
Yeah,
bodybuilders are strong. They
yeah.
they are.
It'd be easier to measure, I guess in like bench, it might be harder to measure. But let's say, we take a powerlifter and we fucking have them do tricep extensions versus a bodybuilder. I guarantee you, the body even those take those same people who could bench the same amount, the bodybuilder will have stronger try will be able to execute triceps extensions with more weight. I would argue in
Right.
most scenarios. Obviously, there's variances here, but I just feel like the harder if you're making a movement harder, locking in on your target muscle, executing with intent, you're going to be stronger. That muscle will be
Yeah.
stronger.
Well, even on like bench press, squat, even without having great technique, I would hazard guess, just because I watched you doing dumbbell press the other day, and you
Me?
had 150, yeah, and you had 150s in your hands.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
like I would hazard a guess that you could probably bench somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 even without like spending a lot of time on it. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like that's still like people don't realize like if you were to compare yourself to the average power lifter, or not even the average, but decent power lifters, you would still do very well.
Yeah.
So it's like I mean, are we gonna then argue that bodybuilders aren't strong when it's like you would probably compete pretty well in powerlifting? Like you would maybe take I would guess that if you were to take 1 to 2 months and specifically work on the bench press format and the bench press technique, you could probably get into the 400s fairly easily.
Yeah.
And it's like you can transfer it over very well.
Like
I, I
the
don't think
heaviest I've
people
done
would.
is 365 for like
And that was
three or
probably
four, I
that was
think.
probably a long time ago, right?
Yeah, it was a long time ago. And it's because I don't consist like you said, it's adaptation to movement. I don't consistently bench. Every time I bench, every time I've gone that heavy, like I'll go up to 315 and I would always do 8 to 10 to 12 reps. And every time I would do that and go past 315, something would just go wrong. Not like a major injury, but it's like, I have pain here now. And it just got to the point where it was like, I'm not even fucking doing this movement anymore. Because every time I try to do it,
Right.
and it's because bench press to me, it's an ego thing. It's like I want to do a 405 just because like I've never done it. Like I want to do it. And so I always get caught up in trying to chase that. And it just ends up, with something fucking going wrong. So I just gave up on it. But
Yeah, I think here's where the confusion lies when with the whole conversation between aesthetics and strength is people don't realize that when they say aesthetics versus strength, a lot of the people that are talking about that are 150 pounders.
yep.
So it's
I
like,
don't
yeah, I mean, if you're 150 pounds training for aesthetics, obviously you're not strong. It's like you're also not big. It's, but
that's
if you were to
that's
train and get a
that's their
lot bigger,
justification. I train for aesthetics, not
yeah,
strength, and that's why they say that instead of just saying, well, I've only been training for 2 years, so I'm just not big enough, and I just can't. I'm not that strong yet, so that's why they say that. I
right.
just train for aesthetics. That's why I'm not strong. It's like no, you're just still small, and
Yeah.
I don't know
Well,
where
I
the
made
whole
I
thing
made
of.
the I made the joke the other day about bodybuilders not being strong because I hadn't done any hip hinge movements in a while.
Mhm.
And I was just kind of curious. So I just went and I put 5 plates on either side and I did my RDLs with them. And it's like I'm not doing these consistently. It's like, like if you're training properly for hypertrophy and especially if you're somebody who stays more in like the 5 to 10 rep range, like I tend to, it's like you're gonna get strong. You just are.
Mhm.
And so I don't care if I can bench 20 pounds more next year than I can this year. It's just not important to me. It's like, but what I do care about is, am I going to look like a more enhanced version of myself just walking around?
Yeah.
But I always, and that brings up the functional conversation. Well, they're not functional. They're not functional. It's like, what do you need to be functional for? You
Okay. Well,
work, you
no, I
work,
wanna,
you
I
work a
wanna,
desk job.
I wanna talk about this now. Um, I mean, if you work a desk job, you should still. That probably keeps you everything from being functional. You're probably in a fucked up back. You should probably try to be functional. But
Yeah.
uh, what do you think about barbell squats?
Okay. I was watching that conversation from the outside. I was
Mhm.
watching you guys talk about that. And people were tagging me in it. And it was like, and I listened to what you said on it, and I agreed all the way through up until like I think it was like one line you said. But even then, if we were to talk through it, it probably would have just been semantics.
Yeah.
But
So
in
what
the
I
end,
yeah what I
but in
think
the end,
is
like barbell squats are great for hypertrophy. If anybody says otherwise, like they're lying to themselves.
yeah
What you can't say is the barbell squat is specifically better for isolating the quads in a sense that's going to make sense in an overall stimulus to fatigue ratio in the overall context of a larger. It's like you have to get hyper specific if you're going to say that the barbell squats are not good.
yeah. Well, where do we start here? This fucking conversation.
I think barbell squats are great. I personally stopped doing them
Yeah.
simply because I found that I was getting more out of like a Smith machine squat.
So yes, this is what I'm
Like
saying.
I
I think there's a point where it's a point of diminishing returns because I think you get
mm,
you get so strong in the move when you get more stronger on the movement, it induces like way more fatigue. People don't realize this, that when you're doing 225 for 10 sets to failure, that does not have nearly as much of a detrimental effect on your central nervous system as doing 455 for 10 reps does. It might
Right.
feel super fatiguing, but like people don't realize that you get stronger, you adapt stronger, you have faster strength adaptations than you would do with your central nervous system. You're going to feel way more fatigue. So at that point, it makes more sense to switch over to like a Smith or hack squat where, you can get better stimulus without as much fatigue. You can focus more on the quads. But what do you think that it should be essential or critical or more beneficial in a sense to have a foundation of strength built on barbell squats before you decide, I'm not going to do that? I want to focus just because this person wants to focus on hypertrophy. They want to get bigger quads. I'm just only going to do, hack squats instead, because barbell squats are not as good as that. Because that is the argument, apparently, that, barbell squats cannot build quads as efficiently as a hack squat would. So why would they ever do that?
So that's always a tough one for me because because I grew up squatting myself and I did it so much. I don't really have an objective point of view to come from where I can be like, well, I didn't do it and I did just fine. So it's like, and I feel
I
like
don't think anybody's done that.
most people are there where it's like they did squat pretty heavy before they took it out of their programs. So it's hard to make the argument that you would have been able to do the exact same stuff. I shouldn't say it's hard to, like, you can make it, but in the end, pretty well all of us have squatted at some point or another.
Yeah. So
And
now we're saying, like I rarely barbell squat now. I do hack squats, pendulum squats. You do that. The majority of us have switched over to that because we get more of these movements now. But now we have this whole generation of all these new kids who are interpreting that, what we're doing at this point, saying, why should we even do that when we could just do this now instead?
yeah, and the problem is I don't have a good argument. Like, I don't have a solid argument for doing barbell squats if your only goal is hypertrophy. Like, I know, like, I understand the whole idea of like overall raw stimulus and stuff like that. I understand that argument, but in the end, if their goal is purely just quadricep hypertrophy and they're doing like other things for their glutes and stuff like that, I think honestly a lot of it comes down to structure.
Well, first of all,
And
how many
yeah.
guys do you know that are actually doing stuff for their glutes besides a squat and a hip hinge movement?
That's a good question. I think most people ignore it.
Exactly. So you take that out of the equation. Guys are only doing a hack squat, leg extension, a hamstring curl.
Yeah.
I guess RDL
I
would.
think a squat movement pattern, if you can't do a squat movement pattern, I would suggest you learn. Like,
Exactly.
I
So I think
honestly, I think it's a bad idea to never have squatted in your life. I think it's a bad idea.
it's a bad idea. I think the majority of us think it's a bad idea, but these people keep pressing it. They want to know why, and they want to know the exact reason why. And I think, for one,
Right.
I think it all comes down to, first of all, I think it does come down to functionality. You're going to have less functionality. You say, why would you need to be functional? But I think squat is just a basic movement pattern that everybody should know how to fucking do. Because as a bodybuilder, you're something to work out. Like, you're an athlete in a sense. You should be able to do that. I think being able to have that movement down, being able to have stability in that position, is going to somehow, I can't explain the exact mechanism behind it, but it just makes sense to me that would translate to, in the future, having a foundation of strength in that, being able to maintain that, have good execution on that movement, perform a perfect squat with decent strength, would somehow translate to a reduced risk of injury in other areas somehow.
Right.
Being able to hold yourself in
It's
that.
and I'm not gonna lie. I would be hesitant to tell anybody to never squat. I just don't think it's a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't sit here and say that I have a perfect
Because
explanation
it's
for
like,
it.
if I'm gonna barbell squat, as a beginner, you're still gonna fucking leg press, you're still gonna do leg extensions, you're still doing movements that are better for the quads in terms of hypertrophy, and you're getting more raw stimulus out of that barbell squat as well. And you have no fucking muscle to begin with. So what is the downside to that? If anything, I think it would be more beneficial than to completely sub
Right.
that out and go straight into a more stabilized position when you don't even know how to stabilize yourself yet.
I would say probably out of all the things that I could use to argue for people learning how to do a proper squat pattern is the simple fact that there is a point at which people need certain people. I think people do need a certain level of coordination.
Hmm.
I think they I think that is important for people to have. And I think a lot of people who would, if a person was to never learn how to do a heavy barbell squat ever, I think they would miss out on a certain factor of just having overall more intuitive I guess having a bit more connection with their body in general. I
Yes.
just don't think they would. I just don't think you'd have it. I think it would be very hard for you to only use a Smith machine barbell squat for your entire life, and like you could get under a barbell and you're falling all over the place, or you don't actually know what you're doing. I don't. It.
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying
Well,
completely.
people use example for fucking squats now. They use it for squats. Why don't we do all these stabilized positions? And it's like, for like I said, I think it's going to result in potentially more injury down the road. You're not going to have that coordination. You're not going to have that stability. Like, why do you need to work your stabilizing muscles? And it's like not about that. It's just about being functional, having the coordination established, and like compare it to
Mhm.
something like chest. Like, imagine if you only ever did chest machines. And then you try to do an fucking dumbbell press, how you would just be all, you wouldn't be able to stabilize yourself. And that's going to, have a increased risk of injury. You're going to fucking maybe hurt your shoulder somehow or something. You just don't have any type of stabilization or coordination developed, which is going to
Mhm.
make you a better athlete in the long run here.
Yeah. No, I think there is a certain level to which you should be able to perform these other movements, but I don't think they need to be the staples of your program. I think that's probably the way I would put it. And something like I think it's much easier to argue that you don't really need to learn how to do something like a deadlift
Yeah,
than anything else. More because you can like
you could do an
RDL.
RDL, FLDL.
RDLs are far more functional for the overall purpose, and you're still going to develop a lot of strength through that.
Yeah, you don't use the bench press. You could do dumbbell press. You could do,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
like it's like with a squat, it's like an RDL versus a deadlift. They're both still requiring stabilization. These are still free weight movements. You just compare barbell squat to a hack squat. Now we're completely just taking out any coordination and stabilization required that you need to learn as a
Right.
beginning athlete.
Well, and in the end, a hack squat is not quite as a hack squat does not involve like the glutes like to near the same degree
No,
as a squat does. It doesn't actually bring in as much overall muscle mass as a squat does. But it's just one of those things that's really tough because people are like, well, I don't care about that aspect. I don't care
you
about
need
that
to care about
aspect.
that because all this stuff comes into play like in the long term. Like all this shit has a factor. Like if you have an underdeveloped like infraspinatus, or things can start overcompensating for other things and other movements when you have weaker muscle groups, and that can result in more tightness in an area, just potential injuries and all these things. You need to have all your muscle groups developed. You can't just completely ignore something. You're not getting any glute work at all. That's probably going to result in a problem somehow.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's really tough because so many people have this background of lifting these with these more heavy basic movements. And then when they move over to machines and stuff like that, they do much better on these machines, stuff like that. And or like I shouldn't say much better, but they start developing more muscle. And then it's very easy to just look back and forget that we all started off doing those other things.
Yeah.
And very, very easy to just be like, oh, well, we don't do it. It's like, well, yeah, but we did at one point.
Well, that's something people need to take into account. Like, what I'm doing at this point now may not apply to you. And that applies to so many different things. People apply to, what I'm eating now, people say, oh, well, Chris Bumstead doesn't eat this much food or that much food. Well, like, how much food did Chris Bumstead have to eat to get to where he is now? He's not trying to gain 20 pounds of mass anymore. How much gear is this
Right.
guy running now? Well, this guy doesn't need to put on 50 pounds of mass. Now he just needs to maintain, there's so many variables in it. And then what you're doing, when you have 10 years of experience could be completely different from what you need to do to get to that point.
Right. And that's part of the reason. That's honestly part of the reason why when people consistently ask me about, well, what's your split? What's your split? What do you do? What do you do? And I'm like, I do what I do.
Mm-hmm.
Like you like it's my workout is not meant for you. My workout is meant for me. And
Yeah.
it's like if you want to copy some of the exercises or even the workouts itself, you can. But in the end, I'm specifically focusing on certain things because I need those things. It's like I've very much prioritized certain things over other things. I make sure to do things in a certain order for myself. But for you might just need something that's overall more generalized.
Yeah. And when now you have guys, who see the stuff like, what we do now, like the whole thing with like the barbell squats, switching over this movement. I saw a video, a bunch of people kept tagging me this video of these guys saying, they was lifting for 1 year. This guy's lifting for 1 year, one fucking year, 1 year, 12 months or 13 months it was. And he goes, I started doing hack squats now because I did barbell squats for the past year. I did barbell squats for my whole first year lifting. And he showed his legs and he's like, if I would have done hack squats from the beginning, I would have had better legs. And it's like,
Oh
what
yeah,
the fuck are you talking? How do you even know that? How can you say that? Like, there's just so much that goes. Do we even know that you know how to execute a squat properly with depth? How much are you squatting? You could fucking squat 185. That you have been doing this for a year. How can you make that statement? Really? It's just
right.
you're just
Well, I
going off
think
of what you've seen other people say and just assuming, now my quads are gonna blow up now because I'm not doing barbell squats anymore. Those weren't, he says they're not effective for building mass.
right. Well, my quads, I'll say this for myself. Like I had a similar circumstance where I stopped doing like barbell squats and focusing my program around them. I started doing more like pendulum, hack, like even hack sissy squat. Like hack sissy squats I've probably done more for my quads in the last little while than anything else, which is kind
It's
of crazy.
the Tom Platz.
Yeah, it's actually been pretty wild to watch. But in the end, like I could sit here and say, oh yeah, like barbell squats just weren't that great for my quads. But in the end, a big part of the reason why barbell squats weren't that great for my quads was because I was not performing them in a way that was conducive to hypertrophy.
Mm-hmm.
I was doing 3 to 4 reps, maybe 4 reps, like 2 to 4 reps, and I was also trying to hit powerlifting depth
Yep.
and doing it and I was dropping my eccentric super fast in order to make sure that I could move as much weight as possible. And it was all about leverages. I was not trying to actually grow using it.
Yeah.
So it's like, so I could sit here and say, yeah, barbell squats weren't great for my quads. Like, well, yeah, but that's mostly because of the way I was performing them.
I think that's definitely like most people who are probably putting themselves into that camp of like, barbell squats didn't do that much for me. You see all these guys, they do low bar, they fucking, they're hitting just parallel. They're not squatting like a bodybuilder. Like I said, I was fortunate enough to,
Right.
have like these mentors growing up, and I learned how to squat, high bar, ass to grass. I would put the wooden plank under my fucking heels and just ass to grass like Arnold and pumping iron. And that's how I learned how to squat, always hitting depth. And my quads blew up. My quads were big before I ever touched a hack squat before. And I could definitely say
Right.
that, barbell squats, obviously we could say it's genetics. We could say it's that, but obviously the movement I primarily did was barbell squats, ass to grass for years. And I grew great quad development doing that. So when somebody
Mm-hmm.
comes and says, barbell squats were terrible for my leg development, I can't believe that. I think you had to be executing it a certain way.
I think here's what I would say. If you were to take and do barbell squats for the rest of your life with proper technique, I think also part of the thing is people don't realize that leverages also play into it. So like how long your femur is, because
Mm-hmm.
if you're somebody like me for example, when I do squats, they're like my quads actually don't get hit as much as they should because I have poor ankle flexibility, so I have a really hard time getting my knee further over, and two, I have a longer femur relative, so I end up coming forward a lot, which brings my glutes more into it. So like for me, a squat would not hit my quads nearly as effectively as it would for somebody who's, well, let's just say like more Asian limbed, because they can squat very straight up and down and get a lot of stimulus for their quads. And that's not me saying I wouldn't grow
That's
like
crazy
good
because
quads with a squat.
I never thought about that, and I just like ran through like all the Asians I've seen squat, and they all squat perfectly.
It's true. It has to do with it's all femur. It's all femur length is what it
Well,
is.
somebody in your
It's
position would benefit a lot more from obviously using like squat shoes, having the elevated
yeah,
heel
no, that heel elevation would be it's very very
can
helpful
make
for
a
me.
world of difference.
Yeah, exactly. But what I would say is if you just spend all your time doing and you never touched a hack squat, never touched a pendulum squat, etc., it's like you'll still get, assuming you do things properly and progress over the years, 90% of the quad growth that you would have got.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like when we're talking about like hack squats, pendulum squats, and that stuff, it's like essentially what we're doing is we're talking about the percentage points. Where like people think that it's like oh well that means barbell squats are terrible. It's like no, we're talking about like the minute percentage points when you're reaching for that little bit of extra within
Yeah,
the
like people
overall
people think
context of
people
a
think these
program.
these things are like huge differences. Like they think,
Yeah.
once you switch over to hack squat, your quads are just gonna blow up now. This exercise is gonna change everything. It happened with the fucking the lat pull down. Once you do this, your lats are gonna blow up. No, they're not. Nobody's lats have ever fucking blown up just from doing that fucking movement. It's like these are such a minuscule little differences.
In the end, it almost always comes down to this. It comes down to the fact of execution. The
Executing with
re
intent. Yep.
the reason that people don't grow, like struggle to grow big quads when they're doing squats, is because of their movement pattern. It's because of
Yeah.
the way they're performing it. It's like, and then
Yep.
they'll blame it on the squat. The hack squat means that you don't have to guess, means that
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to. So there are going to be a lot of people that will get a lot of quad development out of moving away from barbell squats and going to hack squats
Because
because
hack
they weren't
squats,
bar
yeah,
because
hack
they
squat,
weren't barbell squatting properly. The hack squat gives you no choice.
yeah, hack squat forces them to be in a position that they should be in when they're barbell squatting.
Exactly. But if
Yeah.
they had actually taken the time to address their form, they would have seen not maybe not the exact same amount, but they would have seen very similar levels of growth through doing the
But
regular
then they'll
squat.
also bring up, the argument of the stimulus to fatigue ratio. They throw that
Yeah.
fucking word around like it's candy on Halloween. They love it.
Uh,
Um, barbell squats, they create just so much more fatigue. It's not worth doing. And everybody's so afraid of fatigue now. And I don't know why this is such a huge thing now because the
yeah.
way I've always known bodybuilding is you fucking train hard, you're gonna get tired, you're gonna get fatigued, and you fucking deal with it and you do your another fucking set after you rest. Like fatigue is a byproduct of shit. People are so afraid of doing movements that are gonna accumulate more fatigue. And it's like I
Right.
said before, when you're doing 225, the amount of fatigue you're accumulating, you can recover from. It's not the same as me squatting 500 for fucking 15 reps. It's a whole different thing.
Well, I think the idea behind not wanting to be overly fatigued came from the fact, and I'm not saying that you don't want to avoid fatigue where you can, obviously, but I think a big part of the reason why people got so obsessed with it was because of the fact that people were getting so tired because they were taking such short rest times.
Yeah.
And they were taking such short rest times that it was like, okay, well, now we need to figure out how to maximize this. And that became super, super important. And then when people started taking longer rest times, like 3 to 5 minutes between sets, and that no longer was a factor, it just kind of stayed around. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm not saying that you don't want to improve your stimulus to fatigue ratio. Obviously, you do. But in the end, there's a lot of stimulus on a barbell squat. So it's like, so what they're saying the stimulus to fatigue ratio, not realizing that the stimulus is incredibly high.
Yeah.
So it's like, so maybe it's worth accumulating a little bit of fatigue for a stimulus that's that great.
Yeah, they say it as if barbell squats have no stimulus. It's just all fatigue.
Right.
Yeah,
It's more similar to talking about, and I know you'll like this one because it was something that I had to kind of adjust my stance on was weighted chin-ups. Weighted
yeah,
chin-ups have a pretty poor stimulus to fatigue ratio for what you're trying to accomplish, is what I would say.
yeah,
Now, that doesn't mean that there's not going to be stimulus. That doesn't mean that there's not going to be some level of growth, possibly if you have not worked those muscles adequately before. It's like, but that stimulus to fatigue ratio is much different than something like a squat pattern,
hmm
where squats are, yeah, sure, they're fatiguing, but they're also a heck of a lot of stimulus.
yeah. I don't know why everybody's so afraid of it. It's all like that.
Yeah.
So many comments I get. It's too much fatigue. Build up too much fatigue. It's like, are you not here to fucking train? Are you like what? What the fuck? Are we supposed to
People
just get
are
by a workout and it's just a breeze? That was easy.
and again, it's one of those things we talked about before, where the people who spend their most time talking about that and getting after it were not training hard enough in the first place for it to matter.
hmm
Like usually the people who fully understand stimulus to fatigue ratio and actually understand how to train hard are not the ones who are spending their time in comment sections going after you because you did 12 sets instead of 10.
Yeah, no. These are the people who are fucking 150 pounds soaking wet and heard
Yeah.
you or me or someone else say something, took it out of context, don't understand, and then just keep running around regurgitating it. Somebody said, well, he's fucking told me rest pause sets have poor stimulus to fatigue ratio. I'm like, what? That doesn't even make sense. What are you even talking about?
I I think the problem is when we talk about things being better or worse, or like saying like something is, I mean, social media thrives on the black and white. So when we say like something's crap or something's not good, it's like almost always
It's what gets views.
it's
It's
like,
controversial. People like it.
yeah, exactly. It's like it's gonna do better than if you said, well, this is slightly better than this. Or
Yeah.
like it's like people don't take to that. People take to, okay, this is terrible and this is amazing. It's like, okay, well, I'm sorry. Let's just put it this way. Uh Ronnie Coleman was doing very, very heavy squats and built probably the best legs of all time, or like some of the best legs of all time. And he mainly built that through barbell squatting.
Mm-hmm. But then people will just, jump right to genetics. Doesn't matter. Genetics. People think,
Well, if you can pawn everything off on genetics, then at
that's
that
what
point,
they
what does
like
it
to
matter
do.
how you train?
They'll take every single, professional bodybuilder and they just accredit it all to genetics. And obviously genetics are what allowed them to, get there, to be at that top level, to develop that physique. But it's like, obviously they still have to train properly. Like they have still to do things effectively.
Right, right.
You know, no matter.
And I do think it's like it's one of those things where, like, for example, you got somebody. Let's take Ronnie Coleman for example, and it's like, okay, sure, could Ronnie Coleman have trained more effectively? Yes, but in the end, it's like the reason that he built as amazing of a physique as he did is because he was putting the muscles through enough stimulus in order to achieve that kind of growth.
Yep.
So you can't just say, oh, well, he didn't grow, like he grew big legs in spite of his squats. No, no, squats grew his legs. Like we cannot deny that. Like there are other things where you can say, okay, well, they grew this in spite of this. Sure, that is not one of them.
Yeah.
Like that was very much the prime builder for him. It's like so yeah, could he have developed slightly bigger quads if he'd done more hack squatting or more?
I
Yeah, I'm
can't, I
sure he
can't, I
could.
can't imagine him with bigger
Yeah,
quads,
like
honestly.
that's the thing. Like I'm sure he could have developed slightly bigger, but it's like in the end we're talking again percentage points. We're not
Yeah.
talking tens of percentage points. We're talking like maybe like 3 to 4% or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's go to the let's go back to the bro split, push pull legs bro split. What do you said your split? Do you follow any type of specific split, or you just only train intuitively?
So yeah, so what I do typically is this. I used to do a push pull legs. That was a split that I would do more often, and then I moved to what was more of like a push pull legs accessories, like more so arms and shoulders. And then what I did was I was like I started kind of combining different concepts together. So now basically I just give myself enough rest time in between muscle groups, and I go hard at those muscle groups.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe I hit chest on Monday. If I hit chest on Monday, I'm not going to hit it again until at least Friday.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean I'm going to hit it on Friday. I might hit it on like Saturday or Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
So most of the time I end up hitting each muscle group. Like if I'm going at it pretty hard, I hit most muscle groups about what I call 1.5 times per week.
And do you
So like
track volume or no?
no, I don't.
Yeah.
I don't.
I
Like
don't either.
I know some people do. It's just it's not really that important to me.
Yep.
What's important is progressing over time
Everybody
and
over everybody
making sure.
overthinks this shit so much.
Yeah.
They try to
And
get
so it's and like and people and somebody was like, oh, somebody made a comment the other day. They're like doesn't do a split, proceeds to do a chest and buys day. I'm like, oh yeah, what's my split? And they never responded because it was like because I was like because sometimes I do just a purely chest day. Sometimes I do a chest and triceps day. Sometimes
yeah.
I do chest and shoulders. Like it's not always the same. Like it just I very much base it off of how I'm recovering
Well,
from day
this
to day.
is
And if
the reality
go
is
ahead.
that this is how the majority of professional bodybuilders train. People don't
Mm,
realize that, they think everybody has this set in stone split. They follow this exact program. They do this. There's something wrong with that. But the majority of the people who have experience train intuitively.
mm. Well, yesterday I was gonna train biceps, and I had been like, okay, it had been like 3 or 4 days since I'd trained biceps last. I was gonna train biceps, and they were still sore, like very sore. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, not gonna do it. I'll leave it till 2 days later, and
Yeah.
I'll hit them hard again. It's like because there's no reason for me if I know how my body's recovering, I know how it's doing. There's no reason for me to force myself into a mechanical split if I know that that's not the best option for my body at this very moment.
Yeah. That's why I hated powerlifting, because with powerlifting you follow like these exact numbers, these percentages you have to hit. And it's just
It's
like
so
I feel like
it's
shit, I
so
don't want to do
precise.
this. Yeah, I hated it. But
Yeah, I put myself on a powerlifting split for a little while, and I was like, why am I going to 5 RIR right now when I
yeah,
feel really, really good? And then like on days when I wasn't feeling as good, it'd be like push yourself harder. I'm like, it's just I hated it. It was
yeah.
yeah. No, I agree. I agree completely.
So we talked about this a little bit earlier about, push pull legs, bro split frequency. And I just want to reiterate this because people always ask this it's such a huge thing right now. We have these trends and whatnot about the frequency being relevant. And we know that frequency doesn't matter when total volume is equated for. So let's just explain this a little bit more here. Have you
Okay.
covered this before on
Yeah.
TikTok? Yeah. So we
Yeah, I
both
have.
covered it, and they still don't get it. So people don't understand that whether you're doing 10 sets of chest on, one day a week, Monday during a bro split, that it does not make it any better or worse than breaking it into 2 sessions in, 2 different push days in the same week. No,
Right. Well, the problem is everybody wants to make it a completely mathematical formula,
it's
and
not.
your body doesn't work on a mathematical formula.
Yeah.
So what they want is they want to make it about how much weight they move. They
Yep.
they want to make it they want to make it more strength oriented than hypertrophy oriented. So
Mm-hmm.
in their mind, it's okay, if I could squat 200 pounds for 10 reps, and I could do 10 reps, 8 reps, 7 reps, and I did that on Monday, and I went and did the same thing on Thursday. They're like, I can do it for 10 reps, 8 reps, 7 reps again. But if I was to do all of those sets on the same day, then I would only be able to get like 7 reps again, and then 6 reps and 5 reps. And
Mm-hmm.
therefore, the overall amount of weight being moved isn't as much. And so they try to math their way through to this solution. The problem is it doesn't work in real life.
It's not how it works.
Like
No.
it doesn't work because mechanical tension is not driven by the amount of weight that is on you. That's
Yeah.
what the problem is. They're trying to make mechanical tension about the amount of weight that's sitting on your back. It's not
Yeah.
about the amount of weight that's sitting on your back. It's about the voluntary effort or involuntary contraction speed that is happening from your muscles, and that is what's sending the signal. So in the end, that's why you can also take, and people talk about blood flow restricted training, and they're like, oh, well, this is superior because this is superior. You can get higher levels of growth with the same amount of weight. It's like, well, the only reason you get higher levels of growth with the same amount of weight with blood flow restricted training is if you make them do the same number of reps because there's more mechanical tension happening with that. But if you take the thing off of them, they can do more reps. So it's like the only thing that it actually allows you to do, and they've equated this before when they've allowed people to actually go to failure with both, is what they found out is that the blood flow restricted training will just allow you to more easily reach mechanical tension with a lighter load. But if you took that off, they'd be able to do more reps. So they could still reach the same levels of mechanical tension without that thing. With a load, they would just have to do more reps in order to do so, but they could still do it.
Yeah.
So it's not, so it's all basically a means to the same end, is what I'm saying. Where
Mm-hmm.
our goal is mechanical tension. That is the
Yeah.
goal.
Yeah.
But people
People
are trying to make
have
it
a
about the amount of
misunderstanding of
weight.
it. Yeah, they become hyper focused on the numbers. I got to beat these numbers. So I would say,
Yeah.
it's important to. I don't. Do you logbook? Yeah. See, I don't logbook either, but people like to logbook. Whatever. It's important to you want to progress on movements. You could have movements you progress on and whatnot, but really, it's just about when you're bodybuilding. It's about going to fucking. It's about going to failure. People think if I break up me benching or dumbbell pressing, to 2 sessions, I could do more weight or whatever. It doesn't matter. I could say I do, I'll fucking set to 20 reps with lighter weight to go to failure one day and then go to 8 reps with heavier weight, another day to failure. As long as I'm going to failure, it's still, producing the same outcome essentially, just because I use lighter weight or heavier weight, or if I moved up in weight and moved down weight. People think if you go as the fatigue builds throughout the workout, if you're doing higher volume in like a bro split, that since you're able to do less weight, that produces less mechanical tension. They get less
Yeah.
growth out of it. It's not how it works. As long as you're still pushing failure, you're still having effective stimulating sets, you're getting the same result out of it.
Right. Well,
Now,
and especially on like my I guess you call them bigger movements, like my presses and stuff like that. I typically stay somewhere in the 5 to 9 rep range. That's where I fail. But every once in a while, I'll miscalculate. I'll not realize, like I'll put too little weight on there or something like that. And what do? I rep it out.
yeah,
I take it to 13 or 14 reps because I'm like, okay, well, clearly it's like this is what it's going to take in order for me to get the stimulus that I need. And
Yeah.
while it's like I don't try to make a habit of going up to 14 or 15 reps with those things, it's like I still know in my head, as long as I take that to the approximate region of failure that I need to, I'm going to get the growth.
Hmm.
And so somebody might watch that set and be like, "Oh, you're doing too many reps. You're going to accumulate too much fatigue." Blah, blah, blah. It's like, shut up. Like
I like to do
just put in the
higher
work.
reps. You don't like to go
Oh,
higher reps?
you like high rep presses? Oh,
No, not necessarily with press. Not on
painful.
like if I'm doing like a primary movement, like I always have like a primary movement I go into. So I'm doing chest, like incline dumbbell press, primary movement. I'm not going to do like a working set of like 15, 20 reps. But let's say my next movement or my third movement is a chest press machine. I'll definitely do like 15
Oh,
reps. You know what I mean?
okay, gotcha.
Um,
Yeah,
but I forget what I was going to say here. What were you just saying?
I was just talking about the fact that people would make that a whole fatigue argument when it's like, no,
Oh,
like
yeah, yeah.
I just went a little bit heavier than I meant to
Yeah,
and
I
just
tell
repped
this
it out.
to clients all the time too, because people will, miscalculate, or misjudge their strength. If I have you saying like, let's do a working set of 8 to 10 reps, to failure, but you happen to pick a weight where you don't fail at 10 reps. You don't fucking stop the set there. If you could get
Yeah,
if you're close enough to failure where you're still going to get 2 or 3 more reps, I want you to continue the set. If it's if
exactly.
it's if it's so light where you're going to get 10 more reps, all right, do another fucking set, go heavier. But if you have like if you're stopping, you want to go say it's 10 reps and you still could do 2 or 3 more, go to failure. And now next time around, next time you do that, just go heavier.
Right. Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And that's the thing. I feel like people are they're trying to be so calculative about it that if they aren't going to hit that failure in that range or something like that, they'll just stop at the end of the range.
Yeah.
They'll convince themselves that 9 was their failure point. I'm like, I watched you do that set. You sent me a video of it. You did not fail at 9.
The thing is, when a lot of times when people tell themselves a number, they will mentally convince themselves to stop at that number. They'll you can convince yourself that like you're failing at that number. You see it all the
Yeah.
time on legs. When people do leg press or squats, if you say do a working set to 10 reps, even if people are using heavy enough weight, they'll get to 10 reps and start to get a little hard. Like, oh, I failed. And like you could realize that you could watch them do and say, okay, you could have done 4 or 5 more reps here easily. You're just
Right.
giving up. You're convincing yourself, you've hit this failure point because you're just hyper focused. You already have that number in your head going into the set when,
Mm-hmm.
really you should enter the set, just thinking, I'm going to go to failure. You pick this
Yep.
weight aiming to hit around 10 reps, but no, I'm going to failure, whether that's 10 reps or not.
Yeah. And that's really honestly part of the reason why I do like the lower rep ranges in general for people is because once people start getting into the higher rep ranges, I've noticed this with a lot of people that I've worked with, they get almost like they either get bored or they're like, well, this seems like it's been a lot, so they almost like convince themselves that they're at failure.
Well, it becomes more
And
of a
they and
mental battle
they stop short. Yeah, exactly.
because if you're
They start to
doing,
feel the burn, and then it's like, oh,
they feel the lactic
yeah, that's
acid. Yeah.
failure. Like,
I
no,
love
that
that.
wasn't failure.
It's challenging. I love it.
Yeah, that's the thing. But you have a different mentality towards it. It's like you like the challenge. I've the number of conversations I've had with people recently where they're like, "How do you push yourself that hard? Like what do you?" I'm like, because I enjoy it. How do you enjoy that? I'm like, I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know how
Do
to
you
explain
know,
it. Like you get a high off of the pain.
yeah. Do you know Brett Wilkin?
Sounds familiar, but go ahead.
So Brett lives over here. He's lived in Denver too. When I was there, training arm breast, Tim and Martin. And Brett trains like a fucking animal. Like you ever seen Branch Warren? Do you know Branch Warren?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like trains like fucking like absolutely insane, like
Yeah.
screaming, like loud. Like this guy trains fucking insane, like an animal. And it's just like you just watch that shit, and it's just like the high, the adrenaline that you get off of it, when you train that way. It's like I could do a leg press, do 6 to 8 reps. Maybe that's more, producing the same thing in terms of mechanical tension, in terms of hypertrophy. But I sit there and I do this and I'm like, you know, what the fuck was that? If you do a set of leg press to absolute failure, balls to the wall, you feel like you're gonna throw up like 20 reps. Yeah, it's producing more fatigue, but you do that set, it teaches you how to train with real fucking intensity, and
Right.
you just feel like this just immense sense of like holy shit, like it just gives you this enjoyment, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I
I'm
think
going
people
fucking
spend
hard. I'm going balls to the wall. I'm pushing my limits. When you can break, because it's easy to break a mental barrier when you're doing 6 to 8 reps. Okay, like the weight isn't moving anymore. I barely have any fatigue. But if I'm pushing myself, like, okay, like somebody has to yell at you, come on, let's go. Like you get 10 more reps than you initially thought you could have. You're
Mhm.
pushing, you realize how much more you're capable of.
Oh yeah. No, I definitely think there gets to be a point where people get far too comfortable.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's as cliche as it sounds, it's like when you get comfortable, you become weak. Like
Mhm.
that is what happens. Like the more you're like, oh yeah, like this is my standard workout, this is what I do. It's like sometimes I do think there is something to just pushing yourself beyond like what you would normally do. And that's part of the reason why I get the whole argument. I completely get it from a scientific context and stuff like that, that any like intensifiers and stuff like that don't actually add
Yeah.
to growth and stuff like that. But in the end, there is something about the mental limits of just pushing yourself past the original point of failure
Yeah.
that I think it does in the long run allow you to actually push yourself further on those failure sets as well. Like I think it does give you something extra, but
Well,
I don't have anything to quantify it.
like we've already said, 1,000 times here, people like to look at everything as black and white, and what always looks good on paper is just not, how it works in the real world. Maybe like that's, in terms of comparing this to that on paper, sure, it produces the same outcome, but, really over a period of time, if you train this way, just plain bland as this, simple, 6 to 8 reps, whatever for everything, and you do this, you add intensifiers, what do you think is really going to produce more results? I would say what's going to challenge you more, really,
Right.
at the end of the day. I think it just transfers into a lot of things. Either people say this with intensifiers. And what is your exact stance on intensifiers?
So my exact stance on intensifiers is as follows. Uh, we do not have significant evidence in the literature to show that intensifiers are going to increase or enhance growth on top of regular sets to failure. However, I love them and I'm probably still going to do
But it pushes you past the point of
them.
failure.
I know, and the problem is like as much as I don't like I said like I could not reference you to a study to say that it does help over top of the like bring you above and beyond. I could not like give you as and the problem is this, and this is honestly part of the problem with getting to the point where you have built a platform on mostly literature where it becomes hard for you to be able to say things outside of that and people not crucify you for it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, so I'm going to tell you right now, like I do drop sets. Like I do drop sets. I do mechanical drop sets. Like as
Well,
as
even
I as I feel good with it. I have partner assisted lifts. Like
yeah,
I do these things quite regularly, and
even
I do
with
think that they've helped me overall, at least from a mental standpoint, if anything else.
yeah. Well, even with rest pause sets, you're doing you're taking a short break and you're going again. You're taking a short break. You're going again. All those sets that you're this following attempts that you're doing is that you're doing 3 total attempts. You go to failure, then you go to failure again, you go to failure again. You're only get, let's say we do the first round, 8 to 10 reps. The next one you get 3 to 5 reps. The last one you get 2 to 4 reps. Those next 2 attempts that you do following, they're all very stimulating reps. You're all close to the point of failure. They're all producing mechanical tension. You're experiencing mechanical tension in
Right.
all of those. So it makes no sense to me how somebody could say that a straight set is superior to that.
Wait, did somebody say that?
Ryan said that.
Did he say that it's superior, or did he say that it's superior when volume overall is equated?
I don't think he went into context on that, but a bunch of people tagged me in a video on it. I don't think I
No.
saw anything about volume being equated for, but the
I
only
mean,
way
my reps are effective. There's no doubt about that.
I just don't see.
It's like,
I don't because I mean that's what people at least are relaying to me. In my comment section that straight sets are better than rest pause sets. Why would you do rest pause sets? And that makes absolutely no sense to me because I mean, if we're talking about the entire workout, yeah, don't do rest pause sets for every fucking thing. But if we're talking about just taking, your second set on one movement, doing that as a straight set versus doing a rest pause set, you will get more out of that rest pause set than you would with a straight set. You will experience more mechanical tension throughout that set. You will
for
get
one
more.
for set for set, yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
because the
that would that
rest
would
pause set is 3 attempts. Straight set is just one straight set.
yeah. No, I agree. I mean, that's I don't I if I was I'd be surprised if they didn't agree if Ryan didn't agree with that.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna get Ryan
Um,
on here. I'm gonna ask him about it, but I know whether he agrees with that's how a lot of people are interpreting what he's saying. So a lot of
I
people come
think
to me and say
maybe
that.
yeah, because I know that myo reps can be used in order to save time with fairly similar stimulus. So it's like if you were to do one, like let's put it this way, if I had one set to do a week for an exercise, like you can bet anything I'm putting an intensifier on that set. Like
Because you get
I'm not
more.
there's absolutely no reason to do that as a straight set. You should absolutely demolish it with whatever intensifier you decide to do.
Mhm.
Now, maybe if we're talking about the possibility of like three straight sets versus one rest pause set, yeah, the three straight
Well,
sets would
then
probably be
that would be counting.
superior.
That would be counting each attempt on a rest pause set as a set when that's not how it works. You know that those three attempts are one total set.
So they are and they aren't. What it is it's an extended way to induce mechanical tension.
Yes.
So yeah, so like tech, so it almost is its own set.
Yes.
Like each rest pause set is almost its own set. So one rest pause set would be, in my opinion, superior to one straight set. It would be.
Yes.
But then
Counting all those attempts within that.
yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Yes.
But then what people do is they take things out of context where they say, okay, if you have the opportunity to do three straight sets versus one rest pause set, it's like okay, well then three straight sets probably would end up being superior, but obviously it also takes a lot more time.
Yeah. But it's like if we're doing two sets, we're doing two working sets. You know, we're on our second, third exercise, whatever it is. What's going to be better, two straight sets or a straight set then a rest pause set? You know, like you're getting
I
more out of the
think
rest
one of
pause set.
the and you'll be able to ask him about this specifically, but I think one of the things that Ryan talks about is how he will add intensifiers at like the end of his cycle because then he's like going to have a deload after that, so it doesn't matter about the overall fatigue
Yeah,
accumulation.
I think he plan shit
And
is like way more meticulous.
he's super meticulous about all that.
Yeah.
Where me when I go into train, if I'm going hard and I'm feeling good, there's a very good chance I'll add an intensifier in there somewhere.
Yeah, everything just goes off of how I feel. You know, there's days where I'll go in, you know, I haven't trained in a while, but you know, there's days where I've gone in and trained quads and I've literally done fucking three sets for quads, two sets for quads. I'm like, all right, it's over. It's over. And
Right.
there's days where I've done quads for like 9 to 10 sets and I've done, you know, rest pause sets within that on leg extensions, you know, where I've just been able to handle way more fucking work that day and being able to get through. And there's the days where I do, you know, three sets and I'm like, I'm fucking, you know, my quads are fried, you know, just do calves now, finish it up. So that's just the way that I've always found it to be the most productive. But obviously, it takes you know having experience and really understanding your body, knowing how to train to get to that point, and being able to really do that effectively.
Yeah, I think I it's one of those things where I think auto regulation should be something that somebody starts to incorporate as they get more advanced. I just think it makes sense. And I would guess that even the people that are a bit more meticulous about the way they do things still have some form of auto regulation within that system. And it just I just wouldn't make sense to me not to. Because if you don't, like you could just be doing something because it says so on a piece of paper and ultimately just be harming your overall long-term progress.
Yeah, that's also why I don't like doing things that are so systematic, like so meticulous, already planned out. You know, people will do. I don't know if you do this, like say, you know, after 8 weeks, I'm going to do a deload. And it's like I might go fucking months without deloading, even though I don't do like a technical deload where I just won't lift for a week where that's considered technically a deload. But when you hear deload, you know, you think of the fucking
Right.
typical deload. Um,
Yeah.
so I just do that based off auto regulation, how I feel. You know, it gets to a point where I feel like I need that, I'll take that, but I'm not going to do that religiously every 10 weeks or so.
I'm the exact same way. And usually I honestly don't plan deloads at all. Like then the reason for that is because life.
Yeah, it happens. Go on vacation, this
Like
comes up, you know, it just
I
happens.
yeah, I'll have people that'll be like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna deload this week," and I'll be like, "Wait, don't you have a vacation coming up in like 3 weeks?" They're like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Okay, so just keep pushing until then."
Yeah.
Like, why would you deload 3 weeks away from a vacation? Doesn't make any sense. And even like today, I think I'm gonna be going to the gym after this. It'll be my 11th day of training straight. Like
Wow.
I haven't taken any rest days because like for me, I'm like I know rest days are going to happen at some point or another. Sometimes I have to travel up to Michigan to see my in-laws, and we're not in the gym for 3 days or so. It's like and as long as I'm spreading my volume effectively for which muscle groups I'm training, I have not found that not having a rest day in the week affects me negatively unless it happens for like 4 or 5 weeks straight.
Mm-hmm.
Then it can start to become an issue. But outside of that, I haven't really had any issue as long as I make sure that I'm keeping the muscle groups themselves far enough away from each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's crazy because people, hear that and they'll think, that's not possible. The same thing with the whole thing of like volume in a given session, like I said, with the frequency and all that. So let's make it clear here. There's not a set in stone number of volume that, one person can tolerate and one person can't. One person might benefit more from splitting, that muscle group up into smaller volumes, apart, doing more frequency because they can't handle the amount of workload in a given session. But there's definitely people out there, there's no way somebody's going to tell fucking Brett Wilkin, for example, that he can't handle 12 sets when he's doing chest, like if you see the guy fucking train, like there's no way you would ever say that to him. So it's just like you're going off of this number you heard, but it's like that's not how it works. There's just
Right.
so much variance across every individual, and it comes with experience and just what you're used to. All there's just so many factors within that. So, what you need to do does not mean that's what everybody else needs to do. And as long as volume is equated for, that's the most important factor here. And not everybody needs to have the same amount of total volume.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. And it's funny because if we had the same conversation 10 years or so ago, it would have been, and we were having it from a scientific point of view, it would have been, yeah, bro splits aren't as good. Like that's what the literature seemed to be pointing towards. And as more information became available, we end up finding out, like you said, I'm so glad I didn't wait around for the science to tell me what I already knew. Bro splits are fine.
It's
Like
funny
there's
because
no no
John
no
Meadows
issue.
said that, and John Meadows was like a huge proponent of training like 4 to 5 days a week. He would do like legs,
Mhm.
back, chest, and fucking like arms or something. Like he would train once a week. Like if you look at his programs, a lot of them are like frequent once a week, and it's like 4 to 5 days a week. And
Yeah.
look at all the people that he fucking trained. Look at John Meadows. Like, how are you gonna argue that
I've
John Meadows didn't know what he was talking about?
I've never actually trained on a true bro split. I think the closest I've gotten was like once every 5 days or so is when I'll hit a muscle group. Once every 5 or 6 days is when I'll hit a muscle group, but it's never been like only once a week. And I'm honestly considering just hopping on a bro split just to shut people up
Yeah.
and be like, look, like I'm making just as much progress doing this and
Well,
just do it for fun.
a bro split can be like a variety of different things. It's not just
Oh
set up
yeah.
one standard way. Like you could have a bro split where you're hitting back twice a week, but everything else, the volume might be lower for that because you want to prioritize back. So now the volume has to be equated for that. So you got to bring up your
Sure.
back volume, taper the other things down, and now you might have two back sessions a week, but everything else is still once a week. And you move that. That's how the majority of bodybuilders do it because they have to focus on bringing something up. So they might have more leg days or more chest focus, more delt focus, and they'll be
Right.
training everything else less frequently, but be prioritizing that. They have to break that. They usually have to break that into two sessions because the amount of volume they're trying to do for that given session, there would be a point of diminishing returns because most guys aren't going to do 15 working sets in one session,
Right.
18
Right.
working sets, but break that into 2 days, lower the volume for the other days. Then now we have a prioritized split, which is still a variation of a bro split. A lot of people think bro split is simply just only doing one thing a week, no matter what, when there's a
Mhm.
lot of ways to set it up. How do you feel about the Arnold
So
split? Wait, what are you gonna say?
I
What are you gonna say?
honestly, so Arnold is what? Push, pull, leg, arms? Is that how it works?
It's chest, back. It's legs, full leg day, chest and back, and then shoulders and arms. Shoulders and arms
Okay.
are one day.
And do you do any arm exercises or shoulder exercises throughout the rest of the week?
No, so it's three
Or
days.
like, or
It's
is it,
three.
or is
It's
it?
3 days back to back. So leg day, chest and back day, and then shoulders and arms day, and then repeat that.
Oh, okay. I mean, overall, assuming you do your volume right, you can do it. Um, I've always been so I'm very hesitant. Did you say chest and back go on the same day?
Yeah,
I've always been very hesitant to pair those two,
yeah. I don't like it. I
personally.
think I think the split is garbage. Not say like all.
Yeah,
Like, I don't think really any split is garbage, but I did that split when I was younger, and I don't like it. I don't like doing chest and back
right.
together. And say I think it
It
limits the
doesn't
amount
sound
of
like how I
effort.
would split. That's
I
for
think it
sure.
limits the amount of effort you're able to put into training back essentially. Because training back is the second most fatiguing muscle group to train after legs. If you're
Yeah.
training back properly hard, going alternating between that chest and back, I think it just takes away from your back mostly.
Well, I've always held, this is kind of how almost every split that I've ever done, almost everything that I've ever done in terms of just overall even auto regulation is my quads, my back, and my chest. I never hit them at the same time. Like those three are what stay away from each other. Like
Mhm.
I'm fine with hitting hamstrings on a chest day. That's no big deal to me. Like
Really, you
I
do
can do
that?
some. Yeah, like I for me, it's like, why not? Hamstring curls, it's like it's not going to destroy me for my chest sets. It's like, but like I would never hit quads on the same day as I hit chest. I would never hit quads on the same day as I hit back. I would never hit back on the same day that I hit chest, unless there's like a very specific reason for it. So it's like, so those are kind of my three that stay separate from each other, and everything else has a lot of play.
Yeah. So I mean, it's just I think training chest and back together could be fine. Like I said, on like a maybe like a prioritized bro split where you're like trying to bring up one or the other, but like you still have
Right.
a dominant chest and a back day separate, but maybe that's your secondary day just to get some more
Yeah.
additional
Yeah.
volume into
That
that.
would make
I think
sense.
that would be fine. But if you're doing that twice a week, chest and back twice a week, I think that's you could just get more out of training each one individually. And people,
Oh yeah, 100%.
people might question, why does this matter? Because, the whole thing we're talking about the frequency and volume being equated for. And now what it comes down to is the amount of effort and intensity you're able to bring when pairing these muscles together. And that
Right.
plays a factor into that as well. So this is also why, people who lack calves, you should do calves in the beginning workout because you're able to give more effort to them, more intensity. So it's not always just about the volume equation. It's about, prioritizing, the effort that you're able to give to what you're trying to focus on the most.
Yeah.
We could get so fucking into this. There's so many things that can really go into it at the end of the day.
So, a question for you then. What is your so like for me, I know what I'm prioritizing currently. What are you prioritizing currently in your splits? Or like
I
what are you prioritizing in terms of your overall volume? What's your main focus right now?
I haven't trained in 6 weeks, but
Oh, gee.
yeah,
Why?
it'll be 7 weeks because of my allergy to growth hormone.
That's kept you up for that long?
Yeah, do you know like anything about it?
All I've heard was you have an allergy to it. That's all I've heard.
Okay, so I've explained this so many times, but I'll try to explain it to you. So basically, I took growth hormone and it was in November. I started growth hormone. It was pharmaceutical growth hormone. A lot of people before everybody fucking tries to say it's not pharmaceutical. It's pharmaceutical growth hormone. And around this time, it's about 2 months after I moved to Florida down here, I started to get like really itchy. And I thought, it was due to humidity in Florida. Like, I'm just like responding, this weird skin. I started like doing all these skincare things, buying different, fucking fragrance free body washes, all this, started doing all this shit. But over the course of time, like in a matter of weeks, this like exponentially got worse, like significantly fucking worse. And it got to the point where every time I'd work out, it felt like I just was fucking, going into like an allergic reaction. I felt like I was like, just itching everywhere. It's just super annoying. Like, you can't focus on anything. So what I would do, what I figured out from working out is there was a point in my workout where it would stop. And it would stop when I started excessively sweating. So then what I started doing was I would go into the sauna before my workout every day and I would cause myself to like fucking itch insanely bad. And I would sit in there for 30 minutes and eventually, it would go away, would taper down, and I was able to work out. And then eventually that stopped happening. It got too painful to the point where I couldn't even sit in there and like endure the itchiness. Imagine it feels like your skin's on fire, like you're getting fucking stung by 1,000 bees at once. And I didn't know what the fuck was going on. So I eventually went to see a dermatologist, and he was like, "This is urticaria. You have hives." So I didn't realize what I was doing at that time was I was basically causing myself to have like a self-induced allergic reaction and overriding the histamine response in my body because you only have so much histamine your body can produce until it essentially taps out. And then what happens is, you'll be able to, alleviate the pain and get on with your day. But it got to the point where it got so painful where I was like, I'm not even going to fucking deal with this. So then the guy asked me, has anything changed since you got in here? Because I didn't really, understand what was happening. I thought it was because the heat. I didn't know. I never experienced this. And then I realized this only started when I started taking growth hormone. And then that's when it exponentially got worse over these weeks of me taking it. And then I remembered a year ago, I took growth hormone again. I took it a year ago. I took pharmaceutical growth hormone. And the first day I took it before I went to bed. And the next morning I woke up and I had these fever, like hypoglycemic like symptoms. And it felt like I was, sick. If I had these extremely cold sweats and it would last like 3 hours, I would have to take like 3 showers, 4 showers back to back because I would be drenched in sweat. I was shivering. I had hypersalivation. And It only started the day after I took growth hormone. I took that growth hormone for a week, and that lasted. I stopped the growth hormone eventually because it just happened every morning religiously, no matter what I did. I tested my BG every morning. I fucking changed my diet, did everything. No matter what I did, I would get these fever-like symptoms, like I was going into, like diabetic shock or like super hypo. And I figured this has to be from growth hormone. We couldn't figure out what it is. Nobody could give me an answer, and we couldn't figure it out. So I just stopped it. I was like, this has to do with this. And then 3-4 weeks after I stopped it, it finally stopped. It stopped happening randomly. So I figured, it had to be from that. And I don't know. At that point, I didn't think, this is like me having an allergic reaction to growth hormone or something. I just thought, maybe there was some point of like, some sort of insulin related issue that might have exacerbated at that point in time. We couldn't figure that out, whatever. So then I decided to take it again. This happened now. So now I'm thinking I have this reaction to growth hormone somehow, and I need to figure out how this is happening. So I started connecting all this research. Took a lot because there's not a lot of research on growth hormone itself because it's a rarely prescribed drug. And what I'm experiencing, cholinergic urticaria, is basically there's a response in my body where I become allergic to heat. So anytime I get hot at all, whether it's like from physical activity, stress, just being outside, I will break out into hives and have this allergic type reaction, and it'll just cause this intense itchiness everywhere. I'll get rashes, and it happens rapidly fast. It's insane. So I can't take hot showers. I can't like go to the store. I can't walk around outside. Like I've literally isolated myself in this house for the past like 7 weeks, 6 weeks now. I can't work out because when I work out, it feels like I'm getting stung by bees. And what happened is I came to the conclusion, I saw an immunologist, and she basically confirmed my theory is right. She was like, you're an expert now. I fucking had to explain all this to her. But what happened was there's different types of allergic reactions. There's different types of hypersensitivities. And a type 1 hypersensitivity is like your basic allergic reaction, which is like a peanut butter allergy. That would have been if I took the growth hormone and I got hives right immediately, or my throat starts swelling up, I know I'm allergic to that. The thing about this is a type 3 hypersensitivity, which is very rare, but it's an immune complex mediated hypersensitivity. So basically what happens is the growth hormone enters my body, the antigen, and I have this autoimmune response to it. The antibodies form attached to the antigen. It forms these immune complexes, and these immune complexes can deposit anywhere in various tissues of the skin. And I think what happened last year was, I don't know where it would have deposited hypothetically, but it would have resulted in something called serum sickness, which is exactly the symptoms that I described, and that's what was happening to me. And this is more commonly seen in like medications that are more commonly prescribed, like blood pressure medications and stuff, because there's just more data on that shows these symptoms and interactions happening. So that would have been something like serum sickness. And what happened this time, hypothetically, with this theory is that these immune complexes would have deposited in my skin, in the sweat glands, which would have caused that histamine response, the inflammation, and made me have this sensitivity to heat now. So now the only way to get this to stop was to stop growth hormone completely. You have to let your body clear out these immune complexes. And last time, that took 3 to 4 weeks after I discontinued the drug. That's why I just randomly stopped. But the immune complexes would have had to clear out. And that's what makes sense looking back on it. And looking at this now, I took the growth hormone for nearly 8 weeks. So I took it for 8 times the amount of time. So hypothetically, it would take much longer for my body to clear these immune complexes out, for my immune system to go back because it's in this overactive state and getting blood work back. I tested for all autoimmune diseases. They all came back negative. But the only thing that was high was my eosinophils, which is just like, eosinophils are like your white blood cells, and they're typically high when you're like in a state of like high inflammation, having an allergic reaction. So my body's just in like this overactive state, and it's just a matter of waiting for it to calm down. And we have no idea how long that will take.
Oh, geez. You have no clue. It's not even like an estimate.
I mean, the only thing you could do is really just like theorize off the math. Like last time I took it for a week, it took 3 to 4 weeks for it to stop. I wasn't really didn't have that much data back then because I just didn't, think of it. But 3 to 4 weeks after taking it for 1 week, took it for 8 weeks this time. So maybe that pairs up to that. Maybe it takes a little bit longer. It's been almost 7 weeks now, so it's still happening. So I have no idea.
Oh, geez.
The only thing
but it's definitely not something that will just be around forever.
I don't know. If my theory is right, which I think it is right. The thing is like when you look up cholinergic urticaria, like if you look into this, the people who experience this, they experience it for like 10 years. Like it's like super debilitating. Like they say it completely ruined their lives. Like they literally have to like live inside. Like they don't do anything. Like they completely fucked their whole life up. But the thing is, like I have to like take into consideration is like, what are these people like? Like, what are they? How proactive were they about actually figuring out what the root cause is? Because it could be just genetic, where people just randomly get it. But then were they testing for autoimmune stuff? Were they doing like what is their life like? They're the variables. Because as a bodybuilder, I kind of have all these variables of my life nailed down. I know what I'm doing every day. I eat the same shit. I train. I do this. I'm in this environment. And now this only happened after I introduced this drug. So I feel like it's much easier for me to like, just eliminate all these variables and, just focus on that. It has to be from this. And then also having that experience last year after that, it's just what makes the most sense. Right. So
Right.
that's, if that theory is true, it's just a matter of time before my immune system calms down and clears them out. But there's people who have this shit and like literally never figure it out, and they literally just get fucked for their entire life and they can't do anything. It's insane.
Oh, jeez.
It's crazy.
That's unreal. Yeah, I
It's
had no
nuts.
idea. Like I all I'd heard was growth hormone allergy. That's it. I had no idea that it was this deep.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. It's literally fucking insane. Like I was trying to, mount the TV. I was trying to install like a thing into the back of the TV, and I'm just literally just putting a screwdriver into the screw. My whole arms immediately just flamed up, like just the amount of pressure just from like putting pressure. It's insane. It's literally insane. It's fucking crazy.
Holy crap.
And it's not like a itch. It's not like an itch, like, oh, like I'm itchy. It's like your arm's on fire. It's like I'm sitting there. It's like I'm like in Lowe's, like trying to like fucking buy a tool, and the guy sitting there explains something to me, and immediately I feel it. It's like nothing else matters right now. I don't care what you're saying to me. Like you feel like a criminal. Like I need to like run out of here right now. Like I need to get into an air conditioned car or I'm gonna fucking die. It feels like you're having like an
Yeah.
allergic reaction.
Huh.
It's crazy.
So have you stopped every compound then for this time?
Yeah, I haven't taken anything, not TRT or anything for almost 7 weeks now.
Jeez.
I completely. This is the first
Does
time I've come
that
off.
does that mess with you overall then too?
I feel completely fine. That's the thing. You would think, after stopping, because I haven't come off in a couple of years, like completely. I would just cruise, go on TRT in between. So when I stopped the growth hormone, I just stopped everything. I basically kind of just said, fuck it. There was like no specific reason. I was just like, fuck it. I don't know. I'm not even going to fucking take anything. I just didn't care. So, but oddly enough, after almost 7 weeks now, not even taking TRT, not taking anything, I feel completely fine. I don't have any side effects. I don't feel like, depressed, like I have high estrogen or anything. So I'm going to get blood work done. I just ordered labs. I'm going to get blood work done this week just to see where I'm at. Cause after 6 to 8 weeks, I should know how I responded. I didn't do a PCT. I didn't do anything. I just stopped completely.
Yeah.
And, I feel fine. And
I'm surprised by that. Thought it might have shut you down a little bit.
I mean, maybe I was able to recover quickly. Maybe it's taking more time. I don't know. The only thing that really happened was I started to get a little bit of acne about 4 to 5 weeks after that lasted a bit. And I don't ever get acne. I rarely
Okay.
ever get the only acne I've ever gotten before was in the past when I have came off and done a PCT, and it would start about 4 to 5 weeks after. And when I mentioned that to Phil, I talked to Phil Viz about it. He said typically a spike in acne like that can potentially be correlated to an increase in testosterone. And with you being off for 4 or 5 weeks at that point, it could just mean that your body's starting to naturally produce again. And if that's the
Return.
case, because nothing's impossible. People like, not everything is black and white. You're going to be shut down. There is a chance that I could have just been able to recover, which would be fucking crazy if that's the case. So I'm going to get
Yeah.
bloods and we'll see if I was able to just recover my natural test, LH,
Mhm.
FSH, if that's all like being, produced
So
normally
you'd be
again.
natty again.
I just start claiming natty now. It'd be crazy because some guys take one cycle and they need TRT forever. So who the fuck
Yeah.
knows? I don't know. I'm also still young though.
Yeah. Well, I mean, back to the whole conversation, that's part of the reason why I'm like very hesitant on that stuff because you never know how you'll personally respond to things.
Yeah, yeah,
But
you
I've
never know.
I've never I've never heard of an allergy to growth hormone like that or what it's done to you in general. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's very very uncommon. That's why I couldn't. You cannot find any information on this. This is what I'm talking about
Yeah.
with people fucking looking at studies. It's like I
Right.
couldn't just look up a study to find this. There's no information on it. I had to literally go in and learn so much information of how does urticaria work? How does cholinergic urticaria work? What is the exact mechanism? How this works? There's not even information on that. They don't know. Okay, what could potentially cause this? How does exactly growth hormone work in the body? What exactly does it do? How could it potentially result in this? What could happen? I had to link all these things together to form a conclusion. And then I brought this to a immunologist. I had to sit here and explain to her for like 20 minutes. I'm just ranting on end. And she's just like, well, that makes sense. That makes it like there's like you just have to understand the mechanisms behind things. Not everything is always
Yeah.
just going to be presented to you at face value and say this is the answer. You need to be able to
Right.
understand everything and formulate these conclusions. If I didn't do that, I still wouldn't have any idea what the fuck is really going on. I probably would have just went to her, and she wouldn't have known either. Would have just took a wild guess, and we would have no idea what we could potentially be trying to cheat here.
Hmm.
Because
So
if we didn't know it potentially could be from this drug, now we're looking into other things. If I never considered that it could be from this.
so now is basically your course of action just to do light activities and see how your body responds and go from there.
My course of action is literally just waiting it out. It still happens every day, so it's just a matter of me.
Oh, so you still get these things happening every single day, no matter what?
Yeah, because I'll take showers, and I don't want to take a cold shower, so I'll try to make the water warm. And like, there's a point where it gets hot, and I'll experience it. There's a point where I'm driving, and I'll just feel it on my hands because I'm just holding the steering wheel. So like, it's just a matter of me waiting for the day where I do this stuff, and I realize it's just completely gone. Because it'll happen there. It'll happen slightly, like it'll happen in the shower, and it'll start to build up. And I can prevent it from getting bad. I start to feel when I'm driving. I have like this fucking anti-inflammatory cream that I'll just put on, and it'll help subside it. So it's not always super bad, but if I like am walking around the store and then I start to feel it, and then also once I know what's happening, because I start to think about it, it'll create like anxiety because I know what's about to happen, which will
Right.
release adrenaline and in turn make my body heat higher, which now fucking results in it getting fucking way worse, like exponentially faster. So, I
Well,
can prevent it.
that was the first thing that went through my head when you were explaining. I was like, how do you deal with that from an anxiety standpoint? Because that sounds
I
like it
have
would
to
make
be
it way worse.
I have to be extremely stoic. I have to like be very, very, very calm. I cannot entertain like any sort of emotion, really. Like if I feel any type of anxiety or stress or anger, like it's like you're so much more aware of your emotions, even emotions you wouldn't even think you're experiencing, just because like I physically feel it now. Like I'm like, why am I itching? It's like, okay, like, you know, this comment just fucking, I'm reading this comment. This is just like annoying me. Like I can't even look at this right now, fucking, because it's just
Yeah.
the minor increase in adrenaline that you have. I just start to feel it. I'm like, holy shit. Like it just makes you so much more aware.
Jeez.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Blocking people on a whole new level now.
I got to block you guys. You're making me itch.
Yeah.
All right. We've been on here for quite some time now. This went on for longer than I thought, honestly.
Yeah, I don't even know what happens when I get on podcasts with people and start talking through stuff. Is time's just gone.
So listen, we talked about training. I don't want to make this a super long podcast, so
Sure.
let's do another one where we just
And
talk about we
you can cut out whatever you need to, so I don't
no
have any issue.
nah, we don't need to cut out much here, but I'll still have to watch over. I'll have to fucking watch over 3 hours of this so I could edit what I need to. But let's do another one where we talk about nutrition specifically, because if we talk about
All
that
right,
now, it's gonna go on for another fucking 2 hours, and then we'll have a fucking
sure.
5 hour podcast. So next time we'll talk about why you should weigh your meat cooked.
All right, yeah, I'll have to admit the L there.
All right, so all the guys watching this, you know who Joel is. It's Joel, right? TNF.
Yeah, yeah, you got
Oh,
it.
it's not Joel. It's Joel. You guys go give him a follow if you don't already follow him. It's another episode of Brass Tack Bodybuilding. And we'll see you guys next time. Peace out. I'll just stop the recording
TNF
here.
out.